Let's see here. Yo, shout out Luke BT Dubs. Jesus is King. Thanks for checking out the stream on Twitch. Gotta change the stream info. We're on episode 3. We're just getting ready to get started. We're gonna be reacting to some Steven Crowder rebuttaling of misnomers about Charlie Kirk, followed by Tucker Carlson content. And we're gonna be health stuff. Some time. Got prayer requests in the. Feel free to put it in the chat. We'll pray for you. Okay, so YouTube, good on Twitch. On Facebook, we are rolling, and so then the we're only 12:10. All right, we've halved the delay speed because less technical difficulties today. So we are making positive progress. Yeah, let's definitely start this prayer. No prayer requests there. Yeah, Heavenly Father, God, Lord, we just thank you for this day, God, that we can come watch the stream, that we can be alive, Lord. Just thank you. Thank you for the breath in our lungs this day, for our friends and family, God, and thank you most importantly for your Son and his sacrifice on the cross, God, that we get to be a part of your family. We're just so thankful for Jesus and for Holy Spirit. We ask that Holy Spirit would guide us and dwell within us and lead us in our lives, and that they would be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Lord, renew our mind and move us towards godly unity, holy unity. We ask that everything from today that you want to be taken from this stream be taken, and everything not, let it fall down harmless. Yeah, so we just invite you into our day, into this experience. We pray in your Son Jesus' name, Father. Amen. Okay. So, we're going to need to look that up. Some way to unify the chats so I don't need a new screen. But yeah, we're going to be.
I had no criminal defense.
These are and actually some people in the lineup like Andrew Wilson, who's on later in the evening, is featured today,
some facts
making
about his legacy.
Cornell West rage quit on Pierce Morgan, and well, what else are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about leftists wanting you to die. I'll get back to that. The biggest lies about Charlie Kirk. Now that, look, this is one of those things that's it's the unfortunate reality that people move on from news. And I want to make sure that this is.
I get called.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Hey, I think that's that fill-in host sign. There's going to the candelabra.
From the people back here, I think which.
Yeah, so they're a terrorist.
Because of the infection.
Yeah. Help someone.
Absolutely target you.
To even think. Michael Knowles.
I'm done today. I don't give a.
God, it's going to be.
But we've already gone through. You can check the previous shows as far as millions of dollars and tens of thousands of dollars that we've had to spend just on security for those individual change my minds alone. If your definition is, and for the sake of surprise, we'll never show you how many are around. Those are just the ones that you guys have seen because they've had to take out the trash a few times. Now, in Destiny's defense, apparently he has made the argument, and the left will do this, right? They'll gaslight you and say, a lot of people would obviously see as personally is an example, a man who
he just.
Like, what's this? Huh? Is that a good? Is that?
It's a fight. You got to stay in.
Look, we're childish. Sometimes we take the low road because it's the road less traveled, except for us. But that doesn't change the fact that there have been a lot of lies about someone who a lot of people would obviously see as personally is an example, a man who lived a righteous life by all measures and all evidence that we have available to us. And I want you to know that you don't have to be as good as Charlie Kirk. You don't have to be perfect. This side needs all different kinds of people. But he was, and that's why
we should aspire to be perfect as
they took his life anyway. And now they're trying to take his name in lying about his positions. This is important to us, near and dear to our hearts, because if something were to happen to me, I would hope that someone could correct the record when I'm no longer here to correct it. It's time for the biggest lies that are now being pushed about Charlie Kirk. It's a claim truth. Okay, so the first claim, and he had to apologize for this because he's a moron. Stephen King said that Charlie Kirk advocated stoning gays to death. He advocated stoning gays to death. The truth? No, of course he didn't. And we're going to reverse the next two clips. Charlie Kirk, again in context, and Stephen King had to apologize for this. There are plenty of people who believe it. Now imagine someone believes that for a week, and they go out and act on it. Are you starting to get the picture? Charlie Kirk was describing how people cherry-pick Bible verses for their own benefit.
The first part is Deuteronomy 6:3-5. The second part is Leviticus 19. So you love God. So you must love his law. How do you love somebody?
Here we go, folks.
You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. And it says, by the way, Miss Rachel,
big
you might
facts.
Want to open that Bible
Yo, let's rewind this.
Leviticus 19.
For a week, and they go out and act on it.
Somebody.
Here we go, folks.
You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming.
You love them by telling them the truth.
Affirming their sin.
Not affirming their sin. This is the crux. So many people get stuck in this false definition of love, where love means to accept all of the sin, or everything that you do as being good, to deem it as righteous and worthy of praise. That if you don't do that, you're bigoted. If you don't do that, you're hateful. If you don't do that, then you're not loving the person. When in fact, love isn't always rainbows and butterflies. Sometimes it's exposing lies. Sometimes it's telling hard truths. Sometimes it's putting relationships on the line in order to tell these people who you genuinely do love these hard truths. This little first snippet already is so important.
Benefit.
The first part is Deuteronomy 6:3-5. The second part is Leviticus 19. So you love God. So you must love his law. How do you love somebody?
Here we go, folks.
You love them by telling them the truth, not by confirming or affirming their sin. And it says, by the way, Miss Rachel, you might want to crack open that Bible of yours. In a lesser referenced part of the same part of Scripture is in Leviticus 18, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying. So, Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters. It's very simple. So how do you love somebody? You love them so much to correct their error.
Yeah.
And so let's just, take the pride conversation out because people think it's an identification, which it's not, it's just sexual behavior. But it's, if you meet an alcoholic or you meet a drug addict, do you affirm their struggle? No. You say, you're better than this. Let's get you free from that. Let's get you free from that activity.
And remember what I said early on. Stephen King apologized because he didn't want to see his book sales take a dip. He believes that that position you just heard espouse is violence. The left presents your points of view, your values, all of your perspectives, all of your opinions as violence, no matter what it is. Also, it is an easy mistake. I have to take some ownership here for Stephen King to make, because I'm actually the one who advocated not stoning to death, not stoning, but at least nerfing Stephen King into like a slight coma.
AI video.
It's unpleasant.
The funniest part about that is the implication that those people have any qualms with doing that.
Well, they would.
That they're like, I don't know. Yeah, what is this?
You mean you can stone for longer?
For longer? Oh, we list all the references. we list all the references for every factual claim, including in this very segment. Link in the description. Every single day. We're the first show to do it. We're still the only show to do it. And I recommend you go check them out and call us on our crap. Here's the next claim that the left has made. They, and a lot of people made this claim, that Charlie said black people are too dumb to fly planes. And I saw, it was hard for us to put, because there's so many tweets and there's so many people saying this. It's not even close. It's not even close. Here's the truth. Charlie Kirk argued that DEI made people wary when they shouldn't be. And he, by the way, specifically in many of these clips was referencing individuals. But here's the first clip.
Anytime we reach racial quotas, we relax the standards. Standards for air traffic control, professors, or college admissions. Therefore, when it comes to pilots or surgeons, if I see somebody who is black, as I said on the show, I'm going to hope that that person is qualified. That's what I said, which of course is legitimate, because they're begging the question, we're not hiring based on merit anymore. We're hiring based on race. So when you see a black pilot, you wonder, boy, is that person there because they earned it or because they were placed there? That's what DEI does. It makes you ask questions you otherwise would not ask.
Yes, and for self-respecting minorities, it makes them ask those questions.
Just another, he puts it so concisely. So here's the reality, that with introducing quotas for black pilots and for women pilots, that they had to have certain amount versus having just the most qualified pilots. It begs the question, like he said, whether or not the pilot, and they're lowering the standards as a result in order to get them into the position. Is this person occupying this job and flying this plane, or having the opportunity to fly this plane, because they were qualified for the position, which they may be on any given woman or any given black person, could fully well be capable and qualified to fly the plane. But if lower standards exist for these subgroups, and this is DEI in general, you're left wondering, is that person one of the people whom the standards were lowered in order for them to attain the position? And that is by no means a directed hate or racism. It's not even specific to a situation or specific to a group of people. If you use, like in this example, black pilot, where standards were lowered, it happens to be that. But it could just as easily be if there was Asian plumber. If all of a sudden, in order to be a certified plumber, there was a certain quota, and you for Asian people, then you'd be like, if you call up a plumber and an Asian one shows at the house, oh, is this guy, is he in this position because he's qualified, or is he in this position because of DEI?
Questions.
Yeah.
There was a Change My Mind, I want to say 2019, where there was a girl at UT who said, well, I don't think I would have gotten in without affirmative action. I asked about her SATs. I said, you're more than qualified. You don't believe that you deserve to be here? And you could see on her face the hollowed out feeling that she could never know. But the left will present that as violence. Of course, they'll lie about it as well. Here's the next claim that they make about Charlie Kirk. They, I think we have a collage here. They claim that Charlie said black women don't have brain processing power. That's how they presented it. Well, here's the truth. He was specifically referencing black women that only had jobs because, according to themselves, they were given this job exclusively because they were a black woman.
If we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Again, addressing specific individuals, black women like Sheila Jackson Lee, Joy Reid, who publicly credited DEI for their opportunity. Here.
I actually am very much in favor of DEI. I don't take that as an insult because I understand that means that I'm just damn excellent and innovative. And yeah, I am DEI. I'm bringing diversity, and that's bringing something great. You're not insulting me.
I certainly am a product of affirmative action.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion matter. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is good for business, and it is good for the economy.
When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black.
So we will rightfully believe that you were hired because you're black.
Yeah. Give like a resume or...
Yeah. Also less tactful about it. This DEI pilot.
I'm drunk now.
Not the flight. Denzel.
I'm drunk right now.
Hey, owning it is a first step.
It is. You got better after
First step. Don't fact check that, you silly bitches.
He's so good, dude. If he was the pilot of a plane, I'd be like, I can't tell if he's acting. I wouldn't be worried about DEI. I'd be worried about is he acting.
He'd be the first pilot I'd want to hear give me the relic. Look, we'll be flying over Schenectady. Yeah. Poughkeepsie? All right, my Poughkeepsie. 2 degrees. 2 degrees in Pittsburgh. 2 degrees. Next claim that the left makes about Charlie Kirk, the biggest lies. You know, the ones that justified his murder to the left. Let's be clear.
Yep.
That Charlie Kirk wanted to genocide trans people.
The sympathy for Charlie Kirk is f***ing weird. There seems to be this weird emphasis on taking the moral high ground and that you are somehow a better person if you're like, I feel bad for his family. This is the world he wanted and the world he was building. This is a white supremacist who wanted both of us dead. He was shot in the middle of saying something transphobic about trans people, and yet you want to have sympathy for him. You don't have to like violence, but I'm confused as to how you thought the revolution was going to be magically bloodless.
Don't worry, we didn't. By the way, we actually obtained exclusive reverse footage of said tranny's mirror.
There is this sympathy for Palestinians, for the Sudanese.
Freak!
You, it's always you.
In case you wondered when we were going to get back to, at least attempting to be funny,
You nailed that.
here's the truth. And you know that Charlie Kirk caught quite a bit of flack for this because he had gay Republicans, and I don't know if there was a trans conservative, but he had many of them at the events of TPUSA and was criticized by some on the right who thought he was normalizing it. And the good news is that's a healthy conversation that people on the right can have. But there can be no doubt that Charlie Kirk dealt very compassionately, at every example we've seen, with trans individuals when they approached him.
I just want to say I'm a transgender male. What age should kids be able to get things like hormone therapy? Because I don't know what's true, what's not.
Tell me, are you comfortable telling me your story?
I've known that since like 3rd grade. And I'm currently 19, almost 20. I've known basically since then.
Hold on. Wife and kids might be watching. Hey, are you watching the stream? All right, don't turn it on. There's just, it's showing this video about Charlie interacting with trans people, and an opportunity to tell their story, and not really the kids do that. Bye-bye.
Didn't start going by like a different name until 7th and 8th grade. I just don't know, like, with the the whole medical stuff, like what's true, what's not, what's helpful, because I've heard so many different opinions.
First of all, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to have an opinion that very few people will ever tell you, which is I want you to be very cautious putting drugs into your system in the pursuit of changing your body. I instead encourage you to work on what's going on in your brain first. I think what you need first and foremost is just a diagnosis. Just someone that is going to listen to what you've gone through, listen to what else is going on. My prayer for you, and again, very few people will say this, I actually want to see you be comfortable in how you were born.
Yeah.
I know that you might not feel that way, but I think that is something that you can achieve. I think that with the right team and the right people, you don't have to wage war on your body, you can learn to love your body.
And here's the thing, I don't even agree with everything that he said in that clip.
I think, again, very first of all, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to have an opinion that very few people will ever tell you.
One, he
which
says
is I want you to be very cautious,
putting drugs
into
about
your
putting drugs in your
pursuit
system in the pursuit of
changing
changing your body.
I instead encourage you to work on what's going on in your brain first. I think what you need first and foremost is just a diagnosis. Just someone that is going to listen to what you've gone through, listen to what else is going on. My prayer for you, and again, very few people say this, I actually want to
go
see
from
you
a place
be
of being
comfortable in how you were
uncomfortable
born.
with her
I know
body
that you might not feel
to
that
a
way,
place
but I
where
think
she
that is
can love
something
her
that you
body.
can achieve. I think that with the right team and the right people, you don't have to wage war on your body. You can learn to love your body.
And here's the thing. I don't even agree with everything that he said in that clip. He's a compassionate person. He's speaking truth and love. And he's not changing his position because he's confronted with someone who disagrees with him. Let me ask you this. Where in the hell do those on the left get Charlie Kirk wants to commit genocide against trans people from that? Here's the answer. They don't. They don't get it from anything that Charlie Kirk said. They get it from the things that they fabricate in order to inspire you and then act like they're surprised by the violence. We have some bonus claims we want to get to here, but we have to continue. Rumble Premium, Mug Club is Rumble Premium. Rumble Premium is Mug Club. You get everything ad-free. You get 100% more show. It's $99 annually. You get this token, this symbol, this hand-etched mug. We can't continue to do any of this without you. You can gift some subscriptions to people out there. Try it for $9 a month. We really appreciate your support. We do not have 10, 15, 20 minutes of ads in the show. We do not have any other corporate sponsors, donors out there who tell us what we can and cannot say. I own 100% of what you see here, and we do this completely independently. So please do consider joining. If not, tune in tomorrow, 11 a.m., and let us earn your trust. If you're not a Rumble Premium member, you're going to be sent to Tim Pool, who no doubt will be covering what's going on with Patel right now. Let's go on to this bonus claim. Oh boy, we're about to open it. Candace Owens, the Jew! Roll the clip.
Essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman because Charlie's thought.
We watched this yesterday. Okay. So not as much debunking as I thought there was going to be. About transgenocide, about black women having like no brain processing power, about I don't know if it was a capacity thing, which is the first one addressing just the DEI. I know that people have taken this other clip. We'll have to dive into that and play that clip in full to show the truth that we should reinstitute slavery because he was mentioning crime statistics in the early 1900s versus now, which is just another complete lie. But that might be in the Rumble Premium. Right now we're not Rumble Premium. Hopefully in the future we will be.
It's pretty wide. Hey, I'm Tucker Carlson. Last week, within just really minutes after Charlie Kirk was shot at that event in Utah, a kind of proxy war broke out over his memory. Who gets to own it? Who gets to use it? Well, the rest of us were still reeling in shock, trying to figure out what happened. A ton of people appeared online, not just in this country, to tell you exactly what happened, exactly what it meant, and exactly what we should do next. And you can see why. With this level of emotion, rage, and grief in the air, it's pretty wise to leverage that much energy. It's almost like nuclear power. It can be used for good or bad. And a lot of people wanted to use it. There's no question about that. So they began telling you, Charlie died for this. He lived for this and he died for that. So the crazier reaches of the left, it was Charlie was a Nazi. And the lesson is Nazis get killed. It makes sense. He was a bad guy who got what he deserved. And a lot of them said that out loud. Certain parts of the right immediately told you that actually this was about something completely different. You know, Charlie died for Israel. Many began to say the Prime Minister of Israel said that, and so did a lot of other people. Charlie was a defender of Israel, which he was, by the way, and therefore he died for that cause. But none of these explanations, all self-serving, are really satisfactory. They don't capture who Charlie Kirk was, and on some basic level, they're dishonest.
Thanks for commenting, Hella Sausage. Appreciate that. Be surprised how many people I've spoken to on my college who used that out of context. Charlie Kirk comments regarding DEI and black pilots to confirm he was a racist. So sad. He was a social libertarian who valued individual liberties and freedom above all else. Back in my days, outcasts in high school became gothic, emo, hippies, or punks. Now they become LGBT. Ciao, I'm out. I doubt this is live. Well, I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. See. Yeah, using the clip out of context, they're saying on their college campus, they're 21, they see it all the time, to claim that he was racist because he was against DEI. Just absolutely absurd.
Charlie was not a Nazi. He was not killed because he was a Nazi. Yes, he was a defender of Israel. He didn't die for Israel, however. Why did he die? What was his life about? What was the sin, the core sin that Charlie Kirk committed against somebody, power, that got him killed in the end? And the answer is right in front of us, certainly those of us who knew him. Charlie's life was defined by his Christian faith, not his religious faith, not his spirituality, but his belief in Jesus, his life as a Christian. And everything in his life flowed from those beliefs. Everything he did, said, and believed came from the fact that he was, above all, a Christian. And that is and was, and in fact has always been, deeply provocative and offensive to the rest of the world. And why is that? It's worth thinking about it for just a second. Christianity doesn't seem like the kind of religion that provoke people to anger and violence. In fact, it seems just the opposite. It's the world's most profoundly nonviolent religion, maybe the world's only truly nonviolent religion, a religion based on a man who Christians believe was also God, who, as he was being led away to be tortured to death on made-up charges, scolded one of his disciples for fighting back. This is a religion committed to love, above all, and to living in peace and harmony, truly. It's a universalist religion that believes that every person has a shot at heaven. It's not exclusionary at all. And so you would think it would make sense that if you're a government or if you're in power, that you want a lot of Christians living in your country, because they're not going to cause massive problems. Not a lot of sincere Christians are fomenting insurrection at any given moment. Pretty much none, most of the time. They're tidy, they get married, they love their children, they pay their taxes, they're commanded to pay their taxes. So why wouldn't you want a nation full of Christians? Why wouldn't you encourage this religious belief, even if it wasn't yours? Why would you hate it? Well, there are a couple of reasons. There are a couple of things about Christianity, and these were evident throughout Charlie's public life, that are deeply provocative to the people in power. And the first is the insistence that Christianity comes with inherently that you are not God. You are not God, and neither are your leaders. God is God, and all of us stand before him in the end to be judged, and all of us will be found lacking. Christians believe the only way to heaven is through Jesus. That's the only way. But all of us, whether we believe in Jesus or not, are fallen. We are sinners. We are less than we ought to be. We are not gods, and neither are the people who lead us. And this has a lot of implications. The first being, if you're not God, you don't get to do whatever you want. There are limits. There are rules that you didn't write that you have to abide by. That's not a judgment. That's a statement of fact. Some call it natural law. It's been the basis of every functioning society since the beginning of time. But the basis of our society is the Christian understanding of justice, which flows from that belief. You are not God. God is. He writes the most basic rules. You abide by them. Period. That's the basis of our law. That's the basis of Western law. And that is a threat, a challenge to people who would ignore the limits on their behavior, very much including our leaders and very much including the most powerful people in our society, whether they're elected or not. Nobody wants to be told you're not allowed to do something. And Christianity inherently tells people that. It doesn't judge them. It just states it clearly. No, you do not have the power to kill, except possibly in self-defense. But you can't just go killing people. And you can't go killing people because, and this is the second thing about Christianity that tends to set the teeth of the powerful on edge, Christianity insists that every human being is created by God. Every single one. And that means that every human being has a soul. A distinct, unique soul created by God. It is, once again, the only true universalist faith there is. And the New Testament is the story of this, an underread collection of books. That is not the story of the Old Testament. It's very much the story of the New Testament. In the New Testament, all people are God's chosen, every single one. And the story itself makes that point. The founder of most Christian churches in the early Near East was a former Pharisee, a Jew who was in charge of killing Christians until he famously met Jesus on the road to Damascus. His name was Saul. He became Paul, and he is the most prolific author in the New Testament and the basis of a lot of Christian theology. And his life tells the story. People can change no matter what they look like, no matter what they previously believed, no matter where they're from, no matter what language they speak, because they are created by God. And every person, every single person, whether you like them or their relatives or the way they look or not, has that chance because all were created by God and all were loved by God. That is the basis of Christianity. That's the Christian story. And so a sincere Christian proceeds with that belief. There is no tribalism in Christianity. There is no identity politics. It's the opposite. You may prefer to be with people who look like you. That's fine. But God doesn't prefer to be with people who look like you. God prefers to be with all people because he created all people. He's the God of the universe, not just of the people you like. And that, again, has massive implications for the way that sincere Christians live and for the way that Charlie Kirk lived his life. And the first is, if other people have souls, if they, like you, were created by God, then they have freedom of conscience. You can tell them what they ought to think, but you can't make them. You can tell them what they ought to say, but you can't force them. Christianity does not convert by the sword. It can't. It requires free will. And it requires free will because it respects the individual conscience emanating from the distinct soul of every human being. And that is why in the West, which is based on Christianity, our civilization is a Christian civilization, tattered though it currently is, collective punishment, hurting people for the sins of their relatives, is unthinkable. It's a crime because each person will stand alone as he was made before God. And every person is equal before God, fundamentally. Does it mean each person is equal in his ability? Does it mean each person is equal in the choices he makes? Of course not. But it means that every person is a human being with a divine spark inside. That is the core assumption of Christianity.
We're all image bearers of God.
When you watch Charlie Kirk, that he believed that. Charlie's been famously quoted for the last couple of days saying he abhors anti-Semitism. That is absolutely right. And he did. He said that in public, and he said it very often in private. He meant it, too. But he abhorred racism and bigotry on the basis of genetics of all kinds because he was a Christian. And he believed that God created each person. Now, why is this a problem for temporal authorities? Why is it a problem for the people in power? Because once again, it circumscribes what they can do. It sets a limit on their powers. If God created each person, including the infuriating, annoying, disastrously wrong person I'm talking to, then I can't force him to repeat my creed. I'm not in charge of his conscience. Only he is. And that is a limit. So when Charlie Kirk said, I believe in free speech, he didn't simply believe in free speech because it was in the Bill of Rights. He understood that it was in the Bill of Rights because it's in the New Testament. He understood that's a right that comes from God, bestowed on all of us at birth. And he felt his job, his duty, was not simply to protect it, but to live it, to show people what that looks like. I just want to play, of the many clips we could play of Charlie Kirk on college campus, he spent his whole life worn out most of the time. As an older man, I often said to him, how the hell do you get on plane after plane after plane? But he felt an evangelical duty, small e evangelical duty to do it, to get out there and talk to people. Why? Not simply to build a coalition or get this or that person elected, but because he believed as a Christian that convincing people voluntarily with words, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the Gospel of John begins. Words are the key to winning people's minds and their souls. And he really meant this. He wasn't just repeating the words. He meant it. And it was obvious in the way that he interacted with people who disagreed with him and people who hated him. Here's one clip that tells part of the story.
Would you want someone who is not necessarily stable or ready to bring a child into this world and provide that child the life it deserves? Would you want them to still bring that child into this world?
Without a doubt, every life has a moral obligation to be able to live.
If I can't give that child the life it deserves, why am I bringing it to...
Got it. No, this will be my last question. I want you to think about it. If a single mom has two 2-year-olds, twins, and she wakes up one day and says, I can't do it anymore, I can't give them the life they deserve.
But that's just not the circumstance.
Hold on. Should she be able to take out a shotgun and kill both those kids?
No.
Of course not, because you think that would be objectionable. That's why I think it's objectionable to eliminate 2 babies that are 6 weeks old, because they're morally the same thing. One just happens to be bigger. One just happens to be older. One just happens to be outside of the womb. They're both human beings. And you have something in you that says, no way is it okay to kill a 2-year-old. That's called your soul talking.
You have something in you that tells you the truth. You can call it instinct if you like. Charlie Kirk referred to it as the soul. But both mean the same thing. You have the spark of the divine, God's spark, inside you.
Let's see.
And it reacts, it hums, it vibrates like a tuning fork. And you know, on a basic animal level, like your dog knows when something fork. And you know, on a basic animal level, like your dog knows when something is wrong.
when Gentiles, who have not the divine law, do instinctively what the law requires, they are a law to themselves since they do not have the law. They show that the essential requirements of the law are written in their hearts and operating there, in which their consciences, sense of right and wrong, also bear witness in their moral decisions, their arguments of reason, their condemning or approving thoughts, will accuse or perhaps defend and excuse them. That we know He writes it in our hearts. God writes it good and evil. You know, we're coming from the line of Adam and Eve, who ate from the knowledge of good and evil. Now, with that knowledge of good and evil comes our sinful nature, but we're able to discern it. But then sometimes people get so they feed into their sin so much, and then they inundate themselves with so much noise to the contrary of what they originally was so apparent, that they can't hear the still small voice of the Lord, and their perception gets skewed. I just wanted to check that out.
Interacted with people who disagree with him and people who hated him. Here's one clip that tells part of the story.
Would you want someone who is not necessarily stable or ready to bring a child into the
eliminate two?
Is that in the end he appealed to it, and the whole purpose of modern society, you have something in you that tells you the truth. You can call it instinct if you like. Charlie Kirk referred to it as the soul, but both mean the same thing. You have the spark of the divine, God's spark, inside you, and it reacts, it hums, it vibrates like a tuning fork, and you know on a basic animal level, like your dog knows, when something is wrong. You can feel it. And the whole purpose of modern society, it seems sometimes, is to get the rest of us to ignore what we know. That vibration inside us that tells us the truth always, it never lies to us. Charlie did not ignore that, and you'll notice that in the end he appealed to it with that young woman. He didn't scream, "You're a murderer," in his face, though he considered abortion murder, which it is. He felt that deeply. This wasn't a performance. He wasn't another nonprofit phony at DC feigning outrage about something. He really believed that taking innocent life was wrong, in the womb or in crowded cities, anywhere. He thought it was wrong because his faith tells him it's wrong, and because his conscience confirms that belief. And so does yours, and so did hers, so did all of ours. We know when something is wrong. And the people above us shouted us, "No, really, there's an explanation for it. That's just your super ego barking at you." No. You know in your heart, deep inside, what every person has known, and that is the murder of innocence is a crime. It's a moral crime. And that girl knew it. And in the end, that was Charlie's appeal. Listen to that divine spark inside you. Listen to your soul speak to you. Turn off the music, get off the drugs, push the distractions, which it's hard to believe aren't actually designed to crowd out that humming inside us. And be still for a moment and accept what you already know, what you were born knowing. Listen to that. Only someone who appreciates the person he's speaking to as an actual human being could speak that way. Notice how rare that is. It's been noted in the past couple of days, Charlie was a free speech champion. Absolutely he was, and I pray that that's his legacy. But I also think it's important to explain why that mattered to him. It was not abstract in any sense. It was central. It was the core. Because consider what it means if you don't respect free speech, which is another way of saying free conscience, the right of other people to make up their own minds about the basic questions of what is right or wrong, and to express their views on those issues. If you don't acknowledge the right of other people to do that, and if you take steps to prevent them from doing that, what are you really saying? You're really saying, I don't think you have a soul. I think you're a meat puppet I can control. I think you're an animal, maybe sub-animal. You're a slave. You're a person to whom I can dictate belief. I don't acknowledge that you have the right to come to your own conclusion is another way of saying I don't acknowledge that you're a human being. It's dark. There's nothing darker than that. And trust me, they believe it, the ones who've thought about it. And there are a lot of those. But for a lot of people, particularly those who are just repeating what they think they should say or responding to the momentary rage of the moment, they just throw stuff out. And we've got to hope that the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, is in that category. She said this just yesterday. Watch.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society. There's free speech and then there's hate speech. This is the Attorney General of the United States, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States.
Don't like hearing that.
Category
called hate speech. And of course, the implication is that's a crime. There's almost no sentence that Charlie Kirk, and I'm not running the risk of appropriating his memory for my own ends by saying this, it's provable. There's no sentence that Charlie Kirk would have objected to more than that. And you've got to think the Attorney General didn't think it through and was not attempting to desecrate the memory of the person she was purporting to celebrate, that she just threw that out there, that she hadn't thought about it. You hope that. You hope that Charlie Kirk's death won't be used by...
Who gets to be the arbiter of what is hate speech and what is not?
Create a society that was the opposite of the one he worked
fundamentally counter to the First Amendment.
You hope that a year from now,
the
turmoil we're seeing in the aftermath of this murder won't be leveraged to bring hate speech laws to this country. And trust me, if it is, if that does happen, there is never a more justified moment for civil disobedience than that, ever, and there never will be. Because they can tell you what to say, They're telling you what to think. There is nothing they can't do to you because they don't consider you human. They don't believe you have a soul. A human being with a soul, a free man, has a right to say what he believes, not to hurt other people, but to express his views. And by the way, that thinking, and not to pile on the Attorney General, who's a very nice person, but that thinking that she just articulated on camera there is exactly what got us to a place where some huge and horrifying percentage of young people think it's okay to shoot people you disagree with, to kill Nazis for saying things they don't like. Why do they believe that? How did we get here? Is it the video games? Is it the SSRIs? Yeah, probably. But what it really is 12 and then 16 years of indoctrination in our schools at the hands of people who tell them that, who say exactly what the Attorney General just said. Well, there's free speech, which of course we all acknowledge is important, so important. But then there's this thing called hate speech. Hate speech, of course, is any speech that the people in power hate, but they don't define it that way. They define it as speech that hurts people, speech that is tantamount to violence. And we punish violence, don't we? Of course we do. They've been taught that every year of their lives. And so naturally, most of them believe it. So when Charlie Kirk is shot in the throat with a .30-06 on camera, I doubt very many young Americans want to see something like that or actually applaud the death of a man, a father, a husband. But they've been told for their entire lives in schools exactly what Pam Bondi just told them. Well, there's free speech, but then there's also hate speech, and woe to those who engage in it because it's a crime. That's a lie. And it's a lie that denies the humanity of the people you're telling it about. And so any attempt to impose hate speech laws in this country, and trust me, there are a lot of people who would like them. There are a lot of people who'd like to codify their own beliefs by punishing those under the U.S. code who disagree with their beliefs. Any attempt to do that is a denial of the humanity of American citizens and cannot be allowed under any circumstances. That's got to be the red line. Because again, when they can do that, what can't they do? And this is something, by the way, that Charlie thought about a lot and that I had occasion to talk to him about a lot. And I really don't want to make any of this about me because it has nothing to do with me. But I did have reason to have these conversations with Charlie a lot, many, many times over the past 3 or 4 months. And this began at an event that he held in Florida in July, the TPUSA M-Fest event, Turning Point event. I often go. I always have the best time. I always see Charlie ahead of time. We have a cup of coffee in a hotel room, talk about what's going on. In addition to being, of course, a conservative advocate, he was also a conservative organizer, a coalition builder, and he was very involved in politics in a way that I'm not, so it was interesting as hell. But it was also a way to learn what young people are thinking about, talking about, because he was on college campuses all the time, and what is the state of a couple of big debates that are happening within the Republican coalition, particularly around foreign policy. And Charlie's views on foreign policy, which I think are fairly well known now, a lot of people lying about them, were evolving, but had really evolved. And who knows why he reached the conclusions he did. I think his Christian faith informed them mostly. It was also the experience of talking to young people, and his views were very much like theirs. He believed that the war on terror had been a net loss for the United States, and it caused incalculable damage, not just economic and physical damage, but spiritual damage to the United States. It was bad. We got nothing out of it. We were only hurt. And he didn't want to see that again, and he felt very strongly about that. And of course, I agreed. And so before that speech that I gave in July, we had a conversation about this backstage, right before I went on. And I was fulminating and getting all red in the face like I often do to my shame. And I was mad thinking about this and thinking about the effort by the neocons in the United States to draw us in to another forever war with Iran. It's not a defense of Iran, of course. It's merely an acknowledgement that we've done this before. This happened in Iraq, which we entered into at the behest of those same foreign policy strategists, and it didn't work. And so I was going on at some length backstage with Charlie, and I said, probably not going to talk about that. I'm not going to torture you. I know your donors hate this when I say that. And also Epstein was in the news, and it was clear to me that Epstein's probably not like a Mossad agent or something, but Epstein clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence and American intelligence and French intelligence, but the only one you're not allowed to talk about is Israeli intelligence. But it seemed true to me, and I had done some work on that. I knew a bunch of people pretty close to that story, so I thought that. And I said that to Charlie, and I said, but I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make your donors mad. I know it's just going to be like an endless flurry of text telling you to stop or you're going to lose a bunch of funding. And he looked at me, I'll never forget it, and said, go all the way. Do it. Go all the way. I said, man, a lot of things I can talk about. I don't need to talk about that. And he said, do it. So I did it. By the way, I think that conversation, Mike on, and so did I, probably exists somewhere on somebody's server, but that's, I think, a faithful rendition of what he said. And by the way, I'm not trying to blame him for my remarks. You can agree or disagree with those remarks, but I'm saying this only because I was shocked and sickened by the reaction of the ghoulish and really repulsive reaction of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to Charlie's death. Basically made it all about him and all about his country, immediately trying to take the energy, the sadness, the grief that people felt over Charlie's murder and redirect it towards support for whatever project he's involved in. And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the same as the nation of Israel at all. Bibi is despised by many people in Israel, and if you know people who live there, you know that that's true. There are huge divisions within the Israeli government. I mean, there are certain parts of the intel world in Israel that do not support some things that Benjamin Netanyahu has done recently. So it's not the same as attacking Israel, attacking Bibi, but I don't think I've ever seen anything lower than his attempt to hijack Charlie's memory and use it for his own political ends, particularly because what he said was completely untrue. Charlie didn't hate Jews. He loved Jews. He had tons of friends who were Jews. He loved the state of Israel, loved going there. He did not like Bibi Netanyahu. He said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country, and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that. But he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that Bibi's defenders on the internet will call me a liar or a kook, but that's a fact. And enough text messages exist that I think it can probably be verified in pretty short order. Not that it needs to be, because that is true. Shortly after that speech, there was a very intense attack on Charlie, and to some extent on me, not that I really noticed. But on him, I have no donors. He had $100 million worth of donors. And so, because he was involved in a different project from just yapping on the internet, which is what I do for a living, he was dependent to a great extent on his donors, of course. It's a nonprofit. And they went after him and tormented him. Not all, of course, many were supportive, but the ones who were offended by my speech, and there was a small, very intense group who were, tormented Charlie Kirk until the day he died. 2 days before he died, he lost a $2 million donation because he had publicly pledged to bring me to the next Turning Point conference in December. And he told me over the past couple of months he was losing a lot of donations over that pledge. They put out a flyer basically saying that I was going to be at this event giving a speech. And so he would text me and say, man, I'm really taking a lot of heat for this, and people are really mad. The American Jewish Committee called in a statement Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite, and, quote, dangerous. Charlie Kirk, an anti-Semite. Yeah. He was not an anti-Semite. He was the opposite. And he was not dangerous. He was a great lover of people and a purveyor of peace. He was the opposite. And he was very stung by that. Those of us who've been called names for a long time are a little bit harder to offend. Charlie was deeply offended by that and expressed some of those feelings on Megyn Kelly's show and in other places. But that did not let up. The reason I'm telling the story is because he called me and then came to see me at my house about this topic. And I said to him every single time, look, I've got my own way to communicate my views. This is actually not the most important issue to me. Lots of things I can talk about. I don't need to come to Turning Point. I can take a year off, no problem. I hated seeing how much he was suffering, the hassle he was getting from people, and I was being attacked too, by the way. It was a huge effort. I wasn't fully aware of it, actually, because I don't go online that much, but there was a huge effort by people, some of whom I know and have helped, and like Seth Dillon at the Babylon Bee, for example, someone who had his own problems with free speech, who was famously canceled. I like Seth Dillon. I had him on a couple of times. I had dinner with him to show support. Seth Dillon was out there demanding that Charlie Kirk take me off the roster, pull me off stage, because I had said things that Bibi didn't like or that he didn't like or whatever. Shocking that someone whose whole persona is wrapped up in the idea that we all get to speak, and if you don't like it, make a more compelling case, that person and many others like him were advocating for me getting pulled off the stage because they don't like what I'm saying. This is a trend, and one that we should be really concerned about. It's not just about Israel, by the way, at all. The trend is really simple. People with power.
Something of note is that we, this is kind of in response after Candace's claims yesterday. About what Tucker was saying on stage.
Don't want to hear disagreement. They don't want to be challenged, ever. That's why we have free speech, to acknowledge that even those of us or people with less power still have a right to talk because they're human beings. You don't own them. So time after time, Charlie would call me or come to see me and let me know, wow, or show me text messages. These people are really mad that you're speaking. And I always have the same thought, like, I feel pretty moderate, actually. I've never been an Israel hater. Obviously, I'm not an anti-Semite. I just don't want more wars, and I don't want a foreign country humiliating my country and telling us what our laws have to be. I mean, this seems like pretty basic America First stuff, and he would say, I totally agree with you, but they want you off the stage. And I would always say, no problem. And he would say, no, it's important. It's a matter of principle. I want you to be there. Great. By the way, I'm not accusing anyone of being involved in that murder. I'm not trying to mutter darkly or imply anything. There's a lot we don't know about who murdered Charlie and why, but I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I think it's important to say that out loud because it's a fact, and there are many liars out there trying, Bibi Netanyahu, number one among them, shamefully, who are trying to distort the truth, a truth that I know and can prove. And the last thing I'll say about Charlie is that his views were changing on topics that had nothing to do with foreign policy, the famous kind of red line, third rail, can't talk about it. But it's possible that the subject that makes people even madder in Washington, New York, and LA than having non-conventional foreign policy views is having non-conventional economic views. Men really don't like that at all. And Charlie's views on economics and on the way that wealth is distributed in the United States were changing fast, really changing fast, and hardening. Not because he was a socialist, hardly. He was about as much of a socialist as I am, not at all. But because he lived here, and he spent a lot of time with young people, and he couldn't help but notice, because he was an observant and honest person, that they're not thriving at all, and that the chances they'll have lives comparable to the ones they had growing up are very small. Most of them won't have houses. They won't own anything. They'll be in debt. And for that reason, they won't get married or have children. And so the people who are born here won't continue their legacy in the United States. It's the end of our civilization. And the root of a lot of this is spiritual, but the root is also economic. And it raises a question, a basic question of fairness. And I tried to address this in the speech that I gave for Charlie in July. I don't think I did a very good job, and it was misinterpreted, but I invoked Bill Ackman. And the point I was making had nothing to do with Bill Ackman being a criminal or even being an Epstein friend. I mean, I don't really know anything about that. I don't know much about. I'm not accusing Bill Ackman of a crime. I'm not accusing him of, being a sex creep or a misogynist or anything like that. I don't think that. I don't know that for sure. And I wasn't trying to say it. What I was trying to say is that Bill Ackman is not creative, not particularly intelligent. Bill Ackman is worth $7 billion. So you have to ask, how? And it seems to me that Bill Ackman is rich for the same reasons that a lot of other people I know are rich, because he's hyper-aggressive and he's well-connected. And my only point was, if you live in a society that awards the spoils to people on the basis of those two qualities, like the most aggressive, the best connected people get the richest, That's a dysfunctional society. There should be a reward for creativity and decency and hard work, steadfastness, following the rules. Like, you should have to add to the sum total of your society, you'd think. It's not an argument against the free market. It's an argument against whatever we're living through right now. This is really dark and ugly. And if people like Bill Ackman are getting the richest, what has Bill Ackman done? Shorted the market or something? Talk down Herbalife? I mean, I'm not even saying that should be illegal. All I'm saying is, if that's one of the richest guys in your society, you've got a very sick society. I don't think Bill Ackman's like a drooling idiot or anything, but like, when was the last time you heard Bill Ackman say something constructive or creative? Like, never. So it's just bad. And it's not just about Bill Ackman, of course. I mean, he's just a minor player in the life of the world, but he's a kind of metaphor for how off track we've gone. And that doesn't seem like a socialist point. Once again, I'm hardly a socialist, and neither was Charlie Kirk. That seems like a Christian point. Fairness is at the root of the Christian story. People will be judged not by who their parents were or by how they look, but on their hearts, on themselves, on choices that they made. That's fair. So again, fairness is essential to the gospel, and it's essential to any working society. In a fair society, or a society that its citizens believe is fair, people will comply voluntarily with the rules because they don't think the game is rigged. But in a society in which Bill Ackman makes $7 billion, and like the smartest, hardest working, most interesting, creative young people you know can never own a home, in a society like that, you're going to get Mamdani as mayor. You're going to get a lot of bad things because people will opt out of the society because they know it's not fair, it's rigged. That's the only point I was trying to make. And Charlie, not surprisingly, made it much more eloquently, I thought, in an amazing interview, the last interview I did with him, late July of this year. Here's part of it.
We know how to create wealth, but we don't know how to create it for the generation that needs it most. If you look at the economic conditions, you would think the other conditions surrounding it are like abject poverty. These are the problems that like third world nations have.
I know.
Our young people can't afford stuff and they have to finance their basic necessities. And yet we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world on the planet. We have a $37 trillion GDP. We have the greatest companies. We have all this stuff to brag about. And yet all of our problems would beg the question, and it's like this inherent contradiction. We're super wealthy on one side, like a powerhouse juggernaut, and we are like an economic nightmare on the other side. How did that happen?
So if there is such a thing as the left in the United States, if it's
this is where truly free markets and not having a mixed economy, like there's nuance to economic policy, not ideologically pure, because there is no, like, this isn't a closed, vacuumed ecosystem for people to live in. There's so many different factors at play, and so, as somebody who just used to be more of that libertarian, complete free market believer, just experience more of the world, and you realize that it's like as idyllic as that can be, or pragmatic.
It still exists. You would think a message like that would at least get a hearing, a respectful hearing. Like, hey, what about wages? What about the ability of young people to just buy a little house, a little lawn in some subdivision? Like, isn't that kind of what they say they want? Empower, the most vulnerable, the people who try hard and play by the rules. They called him a Nazi. They didn't care that Charlie Kirk in real life spent his time trying to stop war, trying to, figure out how young people could buy a little house somewhere. Aren't those like left-wing goals? No, they didn't care at all. And in fact, they hated that because they're for war, because they're for death, because they're for the inequality he described, because it leads to a volatile society that empowers them, of course. They're not a check on power, the professional left, the trans community. They're the shock troops of power. Charlie Kirk was a check on power. Charlie Kirk, inspired by his Christian faith, stood up to people fearlessly to say what he thought was true. And for that, I will always love and admire him. I want to go down to someone else who loved and admired him and knew him well and played a pretty, I think, important role in the final months of his life, and that is my old friend, Megyn Kelly. Megyn, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, Tucker, thanks for having me. That was a barn burner, man. You hit on some really important big points.
I don't even remember what I said, but I meant it. So I just want to start saying, you had this experience last week that I've always prayed I never have. You were live when the news came in that our friend had been shot in the throat, and your reaction was captured for all time on camera. And I just want to start by playing it. I thought it was just an incredible moment that said so much about you and about him. So here it is. Oh, well, looks like we don't have a side. Well, in it, you said, the line that stuck out to me, your first reaction was, he was sent by God. That's the first thing you said. You'd not heard this news before. Why was that your gut reaction to his shooting?
Because I had spent so much time with him over the past few years, just on the air, Tucker. I never went out to dinner with Charlie. I didn't know him quite like that, like a personal friend. But I'd had him on the show more than 15 times. I'd been on his show repeatedly. I'd been to multiple Turning Point events and talked with him backstage quite a bit. Just done a lot with him professionally, a lot. And I mean, I wonder if he's been on anybody's show as much as he was on mine over the past couple of years. And I got to know his thoughts on virtually everything. And I saw what people are seeing now, how they were all infused with his Christian faith. that he was a truly happy warrior, that he gave almost everyone the benefit of the doubt, that he had a much more positive and optimistic outlook on humanity than I do, and I think than you do. I mean, I think we're just a couple of cynical mofos, and Charlie wasn't. Charlie was, he was like an angel. This picture that the left is painting of him in the news is totally foreign to my understanding of Charlie or to anything I've known. And I watched Charlie on his show too. I know the things they say he said that were controversial. They just fundamentally choose to misunderstand and misinterpret him. I mean, he was, you need look no further than Erica in order to see that he was real. Like her goodness, her love, their love story, her strength in the wake of his death. That's the woman he loved, and that's a woman who loved him. Why? Because he was some devil figure? The opposite. These two were as wholesome as you could find. And everything he said was from his love of humanity and his belief that they could do better. I mean, I'm much more like, no, they can't. Let's move on without them. Like, we've got to, you know. And Charlie, I mean, in all of these college campus exchanges, whenever talking about most people, he would feel like everyone could be redeemed. And if he could just get to them, if he could just talk to them.
What just a testimony of the way that he lived his life. And you can see that's just clear evidence of Holy Spirit operating in and through him. You know, it's no surprise that Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, neither of them are known as much for their faith. I know that Tucker's a Christian. I don't even know if Megyn Kelly is Christian, but the way that he approaches people, the way that he approaches life, humanity, being redeemable, all stemming from his faith.
If he could just buoy them up with hope, they would do better. They could see themselves as Charlie saw them, as God sees them. And I just ran into that optimism and that positivity from Charlie so often that I really did see him as God's messenger, Tucker, as an angel sent to us. And it's like, we didn't deserve him. I feel like he's gone now because we didn't deserve him.
Man, you are too deep for cable news. No wonder you left. That's just such a beautiful summation and so insightful. I'm not sucking up, I mean it. I wish I'd said half of that in my open. So, but why is that so provocative? I've been thinking about this since he was murdered. Like, what of all the people that we know in our business, you know, the kind of let me give you my opinion business, I think it's fair to say he was the kindest. I mean, for real and in private too. Even people he was really mad at, he would always say, "Well, I understand where that person's coming from." It's like, wow, his decency was a challenge to me, who struggles to be that. Why was that so offensive to people?
Because it was power. It's so much more powerful, frankly, than negativity and anger. It's infectious. You know, it's a contagion. It's like a magnet for people, whether they like him or not. They're drawn to him, and he was converting people. So he was a huge threat. That's really, like, I've been asking myself this question a lot over the past week. You know, let's take the accused shooter in this case.
Yes.
And let's say, okay, it was motivated exactly as the authorities say, and he thought Charlie was, quote, too hateful. And this is a guy who's into furries and he's into trannies and he's living with one and, you know, all the things. Why would Charlie have been targeted by this guy for that? Why would it be Charlie? You say all the same things. I say all the same things. Most of the people in our space and in conservative or independent media say those things. Why? Why Charlie? And sadly, I think it's this factor. It's this magnetism from him, this positivity, this aura, like this angel-like aura around him that was so incredibly threatening, way more threatening than the rest of us because it was powerful and it was winning people over. It was converting people at a rapid rate, and not just any people, but young people. You know, the people who had never been converted before, the people for whom people who talk like you and talk like me had never even tried. They weren't even players on the field. They were seated in the whole battle. And he said, no, we're not seating them. I'm going to start at 18 to speaking to them in a way that they can hear and understand me, and I'm going to practice it. You know, for the past 13 years, he practiced. He went out campus after campus. In the beginning, he wasn't as good as he was in the end. He was good, but he wasn't as good. And so it was a skill he developed over time that made him more and more threatening, more and more effective. And you look at the numbers just in the presidential election. It's not an overstatement to say that Donald Trump has Charlie to thank for his election in November 2024, swinging the youth vote by 9 points. Yeah. We've never seen anything like it in the past 100 years. You don't swing the youth vote toward a Republican. Nothing in modern presidential politics. So he was a really integral, hugely important player, even though he was so understated and projected zero ego. So you didn't see him like that. He didn't have sort of the swagger of that in most of his public appearances. He was quick to subjugate himself to whomever he was talking to. But he was way more important than he ever let on. And I think that's why he was perceived as such a threat. That's why him saying the things others would say carried an extra layer of threat, yet both to this shooter and to Charlie's many detractors. And I just want to add as a period to this, as a footnote, I guess, to this, Tucker, you have a lot of it too. And it is the reason why Charlie is not the only one who's been threatened or was threatened to cut ties with you or not platform you. I too have gotten that, especially since you've been more outspoken on Israel. And I couldn't care less the amount of pressure they put on. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. This is madness. Why would you want to silence such a powerful, important voice just because you disagree with them on one subject, one on which we've all watched you sincerely evolve as you grapple with principles you've been espousing for years, like America First, like what's happening to Christians, like what's best for us and our kids here. How do I keep them safe? That's my number one priority. And I've been just absolutely disgusted and recoiled from people who have tried to pressure me on it. Of course, never happened. But I know from speaking to Charlie, he felt it too. You've heard it from Charlie that he felt, and there is a layer here of nefarious pressure to have certain narratives go only one way.
Yes.
That must be called out and must be fought.
Well, I should have said in my open that when Charlie was denounced as anti-Semitic and, quote, dangerous by the American Jewish Committee, you were too. That was a press release. I don't know if you've ever even seen it. And I just remember when I read that at the time thinking, okay, these are like two of the most pro-Israel, basically pro-Israel people like on the internet. I don't understand. So maybe we should have this offline, but let's just have it now. I don't get that. Why would you attack? There are definitely people who hate Israel who are not anti-Semites, or people who hate Israel who are anti-Semites. There's a whole range. And then there are like people who have like, religious reasons for wanting to blow up Israel. Those are all threats. Why would they be attacking you and Charlie? And honestly, I feel like me. I mean, what is that? Why attack people who are pretty reasonable, who don't want to get into a fight on the topic, who just want to like have their country thrive? Why denounce them as dangerous anti-Semites? What is that?
And let me just underscore for your audience what I had said. I mean, the sum total of what I had said when they started coming for me, just to show the absurdity of this. I had said on Piers Morgan that Israel was losing the PR war, that they had lost the Democrats and the independents and were starting to lose the Republican Party in America, and it was time to wrap it up, which was a quote from Donald Trump, who had said it a year earlier when he was still a candidate. Time to wrap it up. That's what I said about Israel. And then at Turning Point at the Student Action Summit with Charlie, we talked all about Epstein and my appearance there. It was all about Pam Bondi, frankly.
Right.
And we talked about whether he might possibly be an asset for someone, and I said he might be. And Israel, would make sense to me. Didn't know, but that's one of the things we should consider and look at. And that will conclude the list of things I said about Israel. That after 2 years of going on the air and defending them every week, turned some weird crowd into, she's an anti-Semite. So, I mean, F these people, because it's a lie. It was even more of a lie about Charlie, who had said even less than me. He had said nothing, like absolutely nothing. And they use those terms about him because he was on the other side of me when we had that discussion, and because he hosted you, and because he had the nerve to invite Dave Smith in a debate because he allowed... That's
because much like the word racism, sexism, or bigotry, or transphobe, or homophobe, all of these... probably more than any of those, anti-Semitism is this word that is used as a cudgel to stymie dissent, stymie criticism of Israel. It's got a intentionally ambiguous definition or inclusive definition where anything they want to be anti-Semitism can be anti-Semitism, and it's not. You can be critical of actions from a government without hating existentially the race of the people that country is making up. I was extremely critical of Joe Biden. And then I'm critical of a bunch of stuff that Donald Trump does or has done, or that his administration or hasn't done. That doesn't mean that I hate Americans. And yet they use the term anti-Semitism really just for their own political ends and for their own ends to play the victim. The old, what about the Holocaust? Okay, so does the Holocaust mean that you killing innocent children and women in the Gaza Strip is okay? Does it absolve you from answering questions about whether what you're doing is ethnic cleansing, is genocide? No. The Holocaust doesn't have anything to do with that. That is textbook whataboutism. And asking said questions, objecting to particularly acts of war, but really anything. It could be any policy, or allowing Christians to be spat on. It's just not anti-Semitism, and really anybody claiming anti-Semitism, it's the boy who cried wolf. Like, it's to the point where you can pretty much just ignore it. You can always be looking inward and examining the way that you behave and what you say and what you believe, and whether or not you hold hate in your heart for a certain race of people, obviously that's not good, and we should not do that. And we should surround ourselves with people whom we can trust, where if we are exhibiting that or espousing those beliefs, that they can really tell us. But most of the time, when they cry anti-Semitism, it's not that.
One side to be represented, and he had the Israel side fully represented too. So this was just such an unfair accusation, and I don't know why these very ardent advocates don't accept friendship when you offer it, when you've proven that you are genuinely a friend. I've said openly, Tucker, I don't want to debate. I'm on their side. There's no reason to put somebody on the show so they can convince me that Israel's right. I'm on their side. I agree with that. But in response to those comments, and then ultimately having Marjorie Taylor Greene on, where we criticized AIPAC, I mean, who defends a lobbyist group? They treat me like I was Mehdi Hassan. Not everybody, but like the loudest Israel defenders. And to turn around and call Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite is such a disgusting smear. And you're right, he's young. He was young and wasn't used to being attacked like that by people who supported him and people whose donations are actually really important to the ongoing existence of his organization. And it took a lot for him to say no to them. And it took a lot for him to be honest about the fact that his opinions had evolved. And let's face it, Charlie was like an unofficial spokesperson for the youth of America, in particular conservative youth. And I don't know if people have checked, but they no longer support Israel. And everybody under 30 is against Israel. Charlie was 31. And so as a friend, he's saying to them, and same way I, as a friend, am saying, I am telling you, you've lost Dems independence and you're starting to lose Republicans. You need to wrap it up. You've had a 2-year long leash. I know you want your hostages back, but this cannot go on until you have every hostage. That's just not going to, you're going to lose every friend you have. And that's what he was saying, because that's what he was hearing from his constituency. And so what he did to them was brave and noble to the donors who were very, very pro-Israel. It was brave and it was noble. He did not deserve to be smeared over it. And look, I, like you, have zero belief that this had anything to do with his death, but it's part of the larger narrative that you're making, that he was a truth teller, that he was a fearless truth teller, and that there were a lot of pockets when he turned to them and said those truths that grew extremely uncomfortable. And whether it was some online, disgusting, messed up 22-year-old in Utah, or somebody who couldn't stand his messaging that was very frank around race or around Islam, whatever, take your pick. He said the hard truths on all of these things. I think a lot of people have to have a really ugly conversation with themselves now in the wake of his death about whether they added to the hate surrounding him.
And for Benjamin Netanyahu, really tormented Charlie. We talked about it many times. He tormented Charlie, and his advocates tormented Charlie. For him to run around saying that Charlie died for Israel is just too much. It's just disgusting. And as his friend,
no,
I feel
that statement was out of line. No, I agree with you. And I'd never talk about Bibi Netanyahu. I don't really, I don't think much about him. I just don't. I had the opportunity to interview him a couple months ago, and I declined. I'm just not, no, I just don't want to. I didn't want to platform him. I didn't actually, frankly, want to do all the work that I would have to do to sufficiently interview him in a way that would be, tough, as I do when I have any foreign leader in my crosshairs. I just wasn't interested. Whatever. For him to do what he did was wrong. It was a moral wrong to sit out there and read part of Charlie's letter and try to have the final say on Charlie's pronunciations about Israel. And he knew that they weren't the full story. And he's a foreign leader. He's not an American leader. So how dare he? At best, you come out there, you say, I'm so sorry for this loss. My prayers to his family. That's it. He was out of line, Tucker. And I, as not even a Netanyahu critic, saw it very clearly and talked about it today on the show, too.
Can I ask you about next steps? I'm always wary of people who I just want to ask you about two issues. One are hate speech laws, which I'm paranoid about, but I think we should be. And two is the effort by one person in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, to get the federal government to ban sex changes for children. And she can't seem to get that done. So are we going to get hate speech laws, do you think? Pam Bondi seems to suggest we are. And two, are we ever going to ban the mutilation of kids?
So on the hate speech comments, that was an absolutely ridiculous comment she made today. I mean, it was absolutely foolhardy. There's just no way she doesn't know what she said is legally unsound. There's just no way she was Attorney General of the state of Florida and became U.S. Attorney General and doesn't know that. So it does worry me, because does that mean she's actually pushing for a policy change? Because there's just no way she doesn't already know what she said is wrong. There's been reams of Supreme Court precedent on it, and she knows that. So is this about policy change? She tried to wiggle off of her original point as the day went on, as incoming came almost universally from the right, that she had said something very, very wrong constitutionally and vile as a moral principle. We've been fighting against this for decades on the right. Like, what is she saying? She sounded like a Merrick Garland. She sounded like an Attorney General Kamala Harris would have put in place. And so she tried to pivot off of it as the day went on and tried to make it smaller.
That's the
and
truth.
all I'm saying is violent threats, criminal threats are going to be punished. Well, yes and no. It depends on the threat. There's actually only a sliver of threats that is actionable under the law. So you're getting closer, but you're not quite there. You're giving, again, still too wide a berth to attacking free speech. But yeah, it is true that certain threats, true threats, can be ruled unconstitutional. You could go after somebody. So she does worry me. Yeah. And, I'm not, Trump was asked about it, and he kind of made a funny joke about it going after the ABC news interviewer who asked him the question. But I think Trump will see that there's so much resistance to this on the right that he won't let her do that. He won't let her push for it. He won't let the Republicans do it. I just have to think Trump reads his base better than she does.
Yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of reading your base, and I've got to thank the presidents for this. I don't know why Speaker Mike Johnson has held it up, but I mean, we don't let kids get tattoos or smoke cigarettes, but we do let ghoulish doctors who are getting money for doing it mutilate children. Like, why can't Marjorie Taylor Greene get a hearing on this legislation? I don't understand it.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, like this, they chalk this up to, oh, it's a spending resolution. We're just going to continue, you know, the spending that's in place until, right? It's like, okay, you're funding mutilations of children, and not just the mutilations that are done with surgeries. You're funding with these, you know, puberty blockers into cross-sex hormones, sterilization of minors who cannot possibly consent to that, and not just sterilization, but actually the end of all potential for sexual
Just
pleasure.
insane. It needs to be put, and this is why Mike Johnson is just an absolute joke
we're doing to our children. And I don't actually,
of the Speaker of the
I don't have
House.
a lot of faith that that's going to get a ban at the federal level, which
Just
means
an absolute joke.
Which means if you live in a
and
blue
he's
state,
been the entire time.
Go, you know, have at it. Go ahead and mutilate children and sterilize them and deprive them of
It's
sexual pleasure
insane.
because it makes you feel good. It's not dissimilar to the left saying Trump shouldn't add additional law enforcement. They shouldn't accept additional law enforcement where he wants to send it because it's racist to let black people live. It's racist to let them live in peace and to not be carjacked in these inner cities, which are predominantly African American. That's what the left is telling us, that it's racist for Trump to send those troops or even volunteer. And they're saying the same thing. What's good for children, what's kind, what's, you know, the honorable thing to do is to let deranged parents chop off children's healthy body parts and sterilize them because that's what an evolved person would do. And so that's another thing that this angel sent to us would speak very frankly about and threaten all these people who have a constituency, whether it's someone with a last name Pritzker, who actually has money invested in the transing of children. That governor's cousin is one of the big funders of all these school pushes on the trans issue, or somebody who just gets a Jones out of saying they're, you know, going to open the prisons and let black people not get arrested for the crimes because they just think that's beneficial, I guess, somehow to other black people who are usually their victims. Never mind the race of the victim. It's not beneficial to any of us. In any event, I don't have hope on that front. We're going to keep fighting. But if they don't ban it at the federal level, which I don't think they're going to, we're never going to get all 50 states to ban it.
I think it'd be worth reading a daily roll call of people standing in the way of that, because that's the kind of crime that historians will reel in horror that we allowed. I think your remarks about Charlie at the beginning were like some of the wisest I've ever heard, and I'm actually going to look at the tape because I was so impressed by what you said and moved by it. So, Megan Kelly, thank you for taking time late at night to do this. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you, as always.
Thank you. All right. Well, we have someone joining us now who I'm just really, really grateful to have. Someone who has been famous for decades for a different skill, and in the last 10 years has really emerged as a consistent voice of wisdom online. And never interviewed him before, but really happy to, I don't think. Scott Adams joins us now. Scott, thanks very much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Tucker. Yeah. We talked once before, quite a few years ago.
And it was on Fox News, and I just erased that whole part of my brain. It's like CTE or something. I can't really remember what I did there. I think I'm ashamed of some of it. But anyway, tell us what you think the lesson of Charlie Kirk's life and death are. Like, what strikes you immediately?
Well, you know, one of the big questions is, how did somebody get to that place where it seemed perfectly reasonable for them to get a gun and shoot a living human being?
Yes.
And some people know in your audience that I'm also a hypnotist. I'm a trained hypnotist. And so I tend to look at these situations through that filter. And through that filter, you can see a really clear cause and effect. You know, starting around, let's say 2016, there was wall-to-wall Hitler, Nazis, 24 hours. Before that, there had been other Republicans who had been accused of being Hitler, but I think that everybody treated it like hyperbole. You know, oh, it's just, you know, it's a political insult, and it's the most common one, so you don't take it too seriously.
Yes.
But imagine being a young kid and growing up when the news, the people in nice clothing would go on TV, and they would say, in all seriousness, you know, he's basically Hitler. The Nazis are coming, and you would create a mass hysteria. Now, a mass hysteria would be worse than TDS or Trump derangement syndrome, because that would be sort of what happens to an individual. You know, they could have TDS. But if you have a lot of people who have TDS and they start talking to each other, pretty soon you've got a mass hysteria. And the mass hysteria created this, what I call a Hitlerian bubble, meaning that a lot of people are living in what they think is a reality that is just completely Hitlerized. They see Hitler everywhere, and they see it in Trump, they see it in his lieutenants. And this is different. So this is not like what we've seen before. All it takes to completely brainwash somebody to believe ridiculous things, even things that their observations should tell them are not true. All you need is people in good suits whose job makes them seem credible to say day after day, it's the repetition that matters, Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. And you convince people that they're living in a hellscape and they better do something about it. So the main thing I saw was that. And it, you know, once the bubble is formed, it's hard to get out. I mean, you can't talk people out of it. There's no amount of information that will change their mind. Cognitive dissonance will kick in if you show them a counterexample. And the weird thing about Charlie, who I'd never met, by the way, I didn't have the pleasure. The weird thing is that when I started hearing all the accusations, and there were a lot of them, I said to myself, well, I'll bet some of these might be a little bit true. So I started to look for the original quotes, etc. None of them are true. And there were a lot of them. They were all either a made-up quote or a quote and a context, and nothing else. And when you hear people talking about it, especially the young people, they'll say things like, he was a bad hater person, but there's no example. So that's sort of the sign that it's mass hysteria, because they can't give reasons, and they don't seem too interested in the reasons. They're just sure that something has to be done. Now, on top of that, for the young people, there's probably also an economic pressure. They might feel that life doesn't have a positive path, so that might be playing into this a little bit as well. But I do wonder what will happen, and I predict that there's going to be another big bubble of psychological distress when the people who have said such bad things about him in public realize that none of it was true. Because over time, it looks like he's going to be talked about so much that we'll finally have a complete body of information about him, so we can understand them. And it won't happen to most people. Most people just have cognitive dissonance. They'll still believe he was Hitler Jr. But there will be some people, not a big percentage, who are going to realize that they did something so shameful that it will haunt them for the rest of their lives. That they were part of saying something terrible about one of the best people that we've witnessed. I mean, he genuinely was a high character person, and you can see in everything he did. So there's something big coming up. Yeah. But then another thing that happened that was fascinating to me, because I didn't expect it, which was the Democrats have always had what I'd call a machine, which is that since they worked with the media, they had the media in their pocket, you would see it happen when they'd have some, all right, our message this week are these words, and then everybody would say the same words, and then the media would just pump it out. So it was like this big.
This is Operation Mockingbird.
There's a provision in the CIA charter that says that the CIA cannot propagandize the American people. President Obama adopted in 2016 that essentially reopened the door for Operation Mockingbird so that the CIA began once again to propagandize American people.
How are they doing that, President?
High-level intelligence officials or people associated with the intelligence industry are running those journals, like Noah Schlackman, who runs.
Do you have national
Mockingbird president? That we tried to already had this.
Trying to find this one clip.
But the Mockingbird gets so people start to say and
on tell you gas prices are back. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
And you don't need us to
tell you.
Has
end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload?
Could
this end of
News economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step.
We're going to find it on another time. There's this awesome video, and it like pans out. It has all like this giant like 10 by 10 square. Okay.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media
dangerous.
Nothing says we value independent media like dozens of reporters forced to repeat the same message over and over again.
Just absolutely crazy.
Well-functioning machine, and then they had the NGOs and all the funding tricks, etc. But when Charlie Kirk died, you could almost feel this massive energy being released. He sort of controlled it, but when it was released, his mortal coil was no more. I feel like that energy just went into people. And suddenly tens of millions of people simultaneously said, what can I do? What can I do right now? That's different. People don't say, I'm going to stop everything. Tell me what to do. I'm going to go to church. A lot of people did. I'm going to say stuff on social media. I'm going to hunt down the people who said bad things and cancel them. But I'm going to do something. We're going to figure out how to start another chapter of TPUSA, and all of that's happening. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. The vigils, et cetera. If anything, the energy, it might be growing. And I've never seen anything like it in my life. I've never seen the Republicans turn into their own machine, and now it is a machine, and it's going to be incredible. I was thinking yesterday. It sounds like a joke, but it's quite serious. The thing that protects the Democrats from also having some kind of problem like this is that they don't have any leaders that are worth taking off the board. I mean, if you said to me, somebody's got a plot to take Tim Walz off the board, I would say, oh, no. If you're a Republican, you want to keep him there because he's not doing a good job. Your Jasmine Crockett's, your Chuck Schumer's. I say, please keep them right where they are. They're doing a great job. Nobody needs to harm them. But on top of that, I don't believe that Republicans, conservatives ever even think that way. I've never heard one say anything suggesting violence. Like not even in just a casual conversation, the joking way you might do it in private.
I think it's
Nothing
pretty extreme
like
to say that there's never been a Republican advocating
overall,
for violence.
The conservatives, the Republicans, MAGA people tend to look at Democrats almost as if they're clowns. They say things that literally make me laugh. No joke. I sound like Biden there, but I literally, that frightened me a little bit. I literally will watch the news and watch the Republican, prominent people talking because I think it's funny. And when they watch, when the left watches the right, they think they're watching monsters.
Yes.
So you can imagine how somebody would want to kill a monster, but nobody wants to kill a clown. Well, maybe somebody does, but so far Republicans have not wanted to kill any clowns. And I do think, well, first of all, the cancellations we're seeing, I have a little bit of mixed feelings about it because my point of view is that the people involved who are getting canceled are themselves brainwashed. And I don't mean that in sort of the, I don't know, the hypothetical way or anything. Like, I mean, actually, literally, they've been exposed to the strongest brainwashing you could have, which is about 8 years of wall-to-wall Hitler. And, Charlie's one of the generals. So if you can't get to the Hitler, you're thinking, well, maybe one of the generals will be less protected, and that was the case. But I feel a little bit bad for them because they're victims too. But at the same time, the way society works, you can't let them get away with that. So there has to be some reckoning. And I am enjoying, I have to say, being a canceled person myself, I am enjoying the Schadenfreude or the catharsis of seeing that it can go both ways, at least for now. And by the way, I do think the violence goes in both directions, but I don't think that there's an equivalent to a massive machine that's been creating a situation that guaranteed there would be violence. If you just keep saying Hitler and you're selling it not as hyperbole, but you're selling it as absolute fact, the people who don't have access to alternative theories are going to believe that, and they're going to act on it. So, and I like the fact that there's a little mutually assured destruction. The left is getting to see a little bit of payback, reminding that the Republicans aren't going to take infinite abuse. There's going to be a point where it's going to come back. I kind of like that. But it just, overall, I wouldn't be proud of it. The cancellations. I do believe that they're brainwashed victims.
So,
I do wonder. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I thought your description of brainwashing seems accurate. It's very distressing to think that could happen in our free republic, the free and brave United States. I thought the people were more independent-minded than that, so that's sad. It's probably just human, though, a weakness that we all share, the susceptibility to propaganda. But why would you want to hypnotize a population or a portion of it? Like, usually there's a goal in mind. What's the goal here?
Well, power. Democrats know that they can win an election that way. If they had better ideas and better policies and charismatic leaders, I imagine that's what they'd go with.
Yeah.
But Trump enters the contest, and you have the most charismatic leader with sensational ideas, according to at least his base. What are you going to do? He's the common sense guy. Are you going to say we really do want the border open? We really do want a little bit more crime in our urban centers? What are you going to do? You don't have any kind of a rational attack to the common sense president who's been here before and knows how to get this stuff done. So it's just all they have. And I don't know that it's intentional that they did it so hard that it guaranteed violence. I don't think violence was the intention. I think just winning elections was the intention.
Yeah, that sounds right. So thank you for this, by the way. Last question: Where do you foresee this going?
Well, it's unpredictable because the cognitive dissonance will cause people to think in a way that's non-standard. That's exactly what it is. So there might be a lot more of that coming. But one of the things that's going to happen is it might be the last, what would you call it? The last straw that makes the entire Democrat situation collapse. Because if you look at their situation, they're running out of money. They don't have good leaders. They don't have ideas that can beat the competing ideas, and they don't have momentum. They don't have the podcast world. The conservatives have that pretty nailed down. Basically, they have the best talent, for just about everything right now. Just an amazing amount of talent in the right side of the world. But then you add on top of that the emotions and the feelings that people got because of Charlie Kirk's death, and that was probably the only thing missing. Was no matter what, I'm going to get to the voting booth. You could have a hurricane, and conservatives are going to crawl through glass to get to the voting booth. So I suspect we will see a number of votes from the Republicans like we've never seen before. It could be sensational.
Scott Adams, I really am grateful that you took time to do this. You look great. Thank you very much. Godspeed.
Thanks, Tucker.
Thanks. I got a text earlier today from someone I sort of know saying, Cenk Uygur, why is he on your show? The Young Turks guy? Isn't this a tribute to Charlie Kirk? Why would you have some like screamy lefty on your show? Well, precisely because Charlie Kirk's life work was speaking with, not just to, but with people he disagreed with vehemently. I thought that our next guest, who's run the Young Turks for probably almost 20 years now, I think, he can correct me if I'm wrong, who's one of the most visible daily broadcasters on the left, the fact that he had this kind of amazing exchange with Charlie Kirk, well, a couple of them, but one pretty recently, I thought it'd be worth hearing what he thought. So it is with pride that we announced our next guest. Thank you, Cenk, for coming on.
No problem, Tucker. Thanks for having me on. I think it's important that we have a moment like this where we try to bring the country together.
Amen. I so strongly agree. You had this kind of famous exchange with him, I think it was 2018 at Politicon, and it got super heated and bitter, and it was like, I don't know, things were viral in 2018, but it was viral. And then you came back to a TPUSA event, and I was amazed and impressed, both that he invited you and that you came. And you still disagreed on some things, but it was, the tone was completely different. Can you explain that? And better and great, I thought.
Yeah. So first of all, in 2018, that was the Politicon that I debated you.
Okay.
And
Sorry. We got along pretty well, as I remember.
We did. And Charlie was debating my nephew Hassan, Hassan Piker. But I couldn't help myself because that's who I am. And in the middle of their debate, I said something to Charlie when I wasn't on stage. I was in the crowd, and he yelled at me, "I live like a capitalist every day, Cenk." And then by the way, some people then thought that it was a racial slur. No, that was just my name. He was just slightly mispronouncing it. So then actually something happened in between that moment and Turning Point USA, America Fest. So we were at the RNC in 2024, and Charlie came by at our booth and said, "Hey, do you guys want to talk?" And we were a little bit taken aback by that. We were really surprised by it. And Anna and I, Anna Kasparian, my co-host on the Young Turks,
yes,
talked it over and said, yeah, we would like to talk. And so he came on the show, and so we had our disagreements. So it's interesting that you have me on here, partly for the reasons that, your friend texted you about. Oh, well, that's strange, right? Left and right. And so I don't agree with everything that you, Megan, and Scott said about Charlie.
I'm sure.
Right. But I think that's what makes it more interesting. So the willingness to talk to us, even though we were so entrenched on different sides, right? And so then when we started the conversation, what wound up happening, it surprised us. So did we still have our disagreements about the black pilot line, this, that, and other thing? Of course we did, right? But when we started talking about corporate rule, he agreed. And I remember, I want to go back and watch the first interview we did with him at the RNC there, because I was kind of shocked by it. It's like, really? You're also worried about corporations having too much power and right? Because Tucker, you can understand that was a left-wing position for a long time in this country.
It was.
But the battle has been joined. And so that is an incredible development in American politics that mainstream media, I think, has chosen to ignore because it's inconvenient for them. Then we got into a specific topic, which was banning private equity from buying residential real estate. And the idea behind that is private equity is the biggest bankers in the world, basically. They're the biggest financial institutions. And they've started to buy all of our homes. Now, that creates a huge number of problems. Number one, it drives up housing prices. That is why they are artificially high. Because so much more demand has come into the market. And I went to Wharton Business School, so this is not complicated, though. This is Econ 101, supply and demand, right? And so, secondly, the number one wealth creation asset that the American family has is their homes. That is how we created the greatest middle class the world has ever seen. And they're taking that from us. And they're going to turn us all into renters. And then we're going to be indentured servants to them, okay? And the way that they are doing this is they are giving collectively billions of dollars to our politicians. So this issue connects, actually, the money in politics issue connects to everything. Connects to corporate rule, it connects to capitalism, by the way, which I want to get back to. Connects to Israel, because it isn't about Israel or any other particular lobby being evil or dastardly or in charge. It's the money that's in charge. And so if Big Pharma, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, et cetera, give money to our politicians, well, then they pass absurd laws, like we're not allowed to negotiate drug prices.
Right.
What in the world? In capitalism, you're not allowed to negotiate prices, right?
I know.
So, and we talked about that, and he said, you're right, that is absurd. And we on the right already believe that it's absurd and that it's against capitalism. Fantastic. So, look, you're right. We've been around a long time on the Young Turks. We were actually the longest running show in internet history. And in that time, we've had, we've been on for 23 years. We've had about 21 to 22 years of hardened battle, right? fighting back and forth, right? And as anybody who's seen me online knows, I can get emotional, I can get passionate,
Yeah.
and I'm not a wilting flower. I fight back for sure, right? So what was amazing though was all of a sudden I didn't have to fight back. That on those issues, not every issue, and not on all the culture wars, but on these economic issues, we have begun to agree. And why? Because the average guy is getting screwed.
Yes.
Period. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. You're both going to get screwed. You're both going to have higher housing prices. You're both going to have lower wages. You're both going to have higher drug prices. And the people that brought you that is the donor class. And so when we agreed to that, then I said, okay, well, now conversation has become productive. We're not just yelling at each other. For the first time ever, we are talking to one another. And more importantly, we are listening to one another. So we did it again at the DNC. And then Charlie invited me to America Fest. And I went there. And again, we disagreed on gun rights. We disagreed on some trans issues. But we wound up agreeing on Dick Cheney and Mitch McConnell, for example. Yeah. Neither one of us like them, like either one of them.
I agree.
And Tucker, I'll say this, and there's a lot more to talk about in that context, but if you told me you are going to go to a massive right-wing conference in the year 2025, and what's going to happen is the crowd in unison is going to boo Dick Cheney. If you told me that when we first started the Young Turks and we're railing against Dick Cheney, don't go in Iraq, don't go in Iraq, Cheney's lying, right? And people are yelling back, support the troops, you're for Saddam and all this stuff. If you told me, oh, don't worry, in 20 some odd years, that crowd will be booing Dick Cheney. And that crowd will be booing Mitch McConnell because they realize that the corporate class, the donor class is in charge and they hate it. I would have said, oh my God, that must be a beautiful day in America.
Well, so this is what I admire about you. You're totally sincere about your principles. Like you almost don't care who's agreeing with you. You believe in the idea, the principle. So you're willing to make common cause with people you don't agree with on everything. You're not partisan. And the second thing I just want to say it out loud is that Young Turks, whatever you think of your politics, has had a stated commitment to nonviolence from the very beginning, and you mean it. And I just want to say that for people who don't know that, and I want to thank you for that because I think it's really important. And anyway, but so let me ask you, how were you treated at AmFest at Charlie's event?
Yeah. By the way, thank you for saying that, Tucker. And the principle of nonviolence extends through everything. So do not be violent to each other. Violence is intellectual surrender. That's saying I can't win the debate with my mind, so I have to act like an animal and try to defeat that person physically. But that means you're surrendering and you're giving up. It's the most immoral thing you could do. It's also the weakest thing you could do.
Yes, I agree.
But that's not just on an individual level. That's also on a societal level. So when we go to war, that is in a sense weakness, saying we could not use our minds to resolve this issue. We could not resolve this issue as fellow human beings. So now we're going to kill each other. Yeah. So that is why we're anti-war, and that is why one of the most encouraging developments of my life is how anti-war the right-wing movement has become. So that another great day in America. So it's still plenty of things we disagree on.
Yes.
But agreeing on anti-war, agreeing on how the donor class is robbing both of us blind, I mean, those are huge developments, right? So now how was I treated at AmFest? I've got to be honest with you. And so the reason why I preface it by saying I got to be honest with you is because sometimes when we go and talk to the right wing, and as you said, we haven't moved on a thing, right? So folks come to us, and I have a simple principle: take the win. Okay,
take the win. Exactly.
Like, so, okay, now you agree with me that anti-war is the right position. Is my correct answer that I still hate you? No, that is not the correct answer. Right. The correct answer is, oh, thank God. All right,
exactly.
Great. Right. And now we'll work on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But for now, at least we had no agreements before. Now we have a number of really important agreements. So, but nevertheless, I had my share of critics on the left. You're platforming it. Yeah. I went to his conference. I wasn't platforming him. He was platforming me, right?
Yeah.
And second of all, stop with all the nonsense talk of platforming people, okay?
Yeah, I agree.
Just listen to one another. Talk to one another. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Oh, but what if you disagree? And of course you're going to disagree. It's America. We're free. We have no two human beings are the same. Of course we're going to disagree on some issues. So if you can't handle that, then you can't handle politics. You can't handle media. You can't handle America, right? So, okay. So with that giant preface, I'll say the people there, honestly, were universally wonderful. So they were. And so you could say, oh, well, haha, that means Jensen with the right wing. No, I'm just telling you what happened. If they were jerks, I would tell you that they were jerks, but they weren't. Okay. And I've got to say, like, this cancel culture, it's not exclusively left wing.
No, I know. Tell me about it. I mean, the efforts that some people made to keep me from speaking at the next TPUSA thing, people I agree with on a lot of things, by the way. I don't disagree with Seth Dillon and everything, Mr. Free Speech guy trying to cancel me, but I was like shocked by it. Like they really hassled Charlie and just drove him to really fret and drove him to anxiety over this. Oh, no, that impulse is a human impulse and we need to resist it.
Yeah. So I love what you guys said about hate speech and how it's unacceptable to pass laws on that.
It's not acceptable.
Yeah, under no circumstances. So, and this is what I say on that topic. So, Charlie said some things about Islam that, having grown up Muslim, I'm atheist now, but my family's Muslim, my background's Muslim, I'm proud of it. He said some things about Islam that I was not a fan of, right? To say the least.
I bet.
So you know what I did in return? I made my case. So what? Right? Like why is it so like debilitating if someone says something that you find offensive? I've said things that I'm sure others have found offensive. You have, Charlie has, Megan has. So what? Then you say something back. Okay, we don't cancel, we don't kill, and killing is the most extreme form of cancel culture. So I despise cancel culture, and I have the honor of having been canceled by almost every part of the political spectrum.
I know. Man, that was really inspiring. And I'm going to text back the person who texted me and say, "Did you watch that?" That was wonderful, and I so appreciate you're doing this. Thank you, and I hope you don't take too much abuse for it. And I'm sure you will, but I guess you don't care, so good for you. Thank you.
That'll bounce off me so quick. I'll just say this one last thing, Tucker.
Yes.
I mean, the idea of making laws against hate speech in honor of Charlie Kirk.
No, I know.
Okay, that's like if I passed away and they're like, in honor of Cenk, we're all going to go on a diet.
Tell me about it. Or the Tucker Carlson no pizza law. No, I agree. I agree.
Come on. That is the opposite of what I did in my life. And regulating speech is the opposite of what Charlie did in his life. So let's all keep talking to one another. Let's all keep listening to one another and hopefully use this moment not to create further tragedy, but to begin to end the tragedies.
Yeah, I'm proud to agree with that, really, really strongly. So thank you for saying it very much.
Thank you, Doc.
Great to see you. Thanks.
You too.
So we want to end tonight the way we began by talking about Charlie's faith and the effect on all of us from a spiritual perspective of his life, and particularly his death. There were reports that this Sunday church attendance was up dramatically as people suddenly felt stirrings within them that this had cosmic significance and that God is real, and this is a reminder that he is, which he is. Josiah Trenholm is a Christian minister, and we are honored to have him now to put this in a broader spiritual context. Thank you very much for coming on, Father Trenholm. So how would you say we should think about where this goes from here? Like, people seem to have a heightened spiritual awareness in the days after Charlie Kirk's murder. How should we proceed?
Well, thanks a lot, Tucker, for having me on. I appreciate your interest and desire to bring a priest into this conversation. I think it's valuable. I would say up front, we should be very careful to make any sort of conclusion from this during this very intense time of mourning.
Yes.
We Christians have a tradition, 2,000-year-old tradition on how to respond to death, and we take our time. This is day 7. Usually for 40 days, we mourn very, very seriously. In the Orthodox tradition, for instance, when a bishop or a major leader of the church dies, he's not replaced until the 40 days is done. And that's not just out of respect for the person in this case. Mourning Charlie, really processing what his loss means is very necessary to do, and it takes time to do that. And we're not going to be able to make good decisions about the future without calming down and processing what we've gone through. So this is the time I think that we should be very careful. We should mourn. We should consign all bad memories to the memory hole. Bad experiences is what we do for our loved ones when they die. There's no benefit in remembering the bad. We instead honor the good and try to imitate the good. We try to, in the person's name, do good. So this is my first thought is really, we should mourn. We should be who we are. And this is what Christian people do. We should take our time about this.
I'm unfamiliar with this. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know enough about it, but I sense that it's rooted in something important and wise. Can you explain a little more why 40 days and what Christians have done traditionally during that 40 days? What does it mean to mourn seriously?
Yeah, well, I share your sense of it not being something common anymore, which is why I'm presenting it, because it is so universally human, actually, and it's not just Christian. The number 40, of course, is humongous in the Holy Scriptures. It's absolutely humongous. And the 40 days of Christ fasting, for instance, in the desert. 40 is a very important length of time that allows us to truly not make immediate reactions that we would regret. Right now, everything is so raw. Everyone who knows and loves Charlie, like you, this is a very dangerous time. It's a very dangerous time. You're being very courageous, and you're actually processing this with people who have known and respected Charlie, which is a fantastic thing to do. But a lot of people who are in the conservative political movement are raging. They're very angry. I was watching a clip from Matt Walsh yesterday, and I saw that Matt was just out there saying that he is just overcome with anger. I think that's understandable, completely understandable.
I have felt that, yes.
I'm sure. But for us to respect this Christian tradition, to pray, typically in the Orthodox and the Catholic tradition, both during the 40 days, we do good in that person's name. We actually do alms. We do charity in that person's name. In fact, you're doing that. Maybe you weren't intentionally trying to do it in a traditional Christian way, but that is what you're doing by trying to help Erica and support her. I was very, very happy to see that you're doing that, because it's what we do. It's what we do in this period. We usually also pray for the person. We don't think that a person, when they die, bing, they've made the transition to the next life instantaneously. There are some in the Protestant tradition who think that. Not all Protestants think that, but there are some. But the vast majority of Christians, Catholic, Orthodox, and some like the Anglicans, we actually pray for the souls of the departed. And we use the image of the story of Lazarus and the rich man from the Gospels, where Lazarus is the poor beggar. He's neglected by the rich man. And when he dies, what happens? An angelic escort comes and picks him up and takes him on the journey to the bosom of Abraham. for us, that is a journey. This process is a journey for Christians of going towards the kingdom of God, but we don't think that it's instantaneous. And so we're collaborating. It's part of what our funerals are too. Our funerals are us gathering around the person and asking the Lord in his great mercy to receive our brother or our sister and place them in paradise until we can see them again. And we're also learning the lesson of sobriety. We're learning the lesson of death. We have to think about death and stare it in the face, because one of the great reasons we are so undeveloped, spiritually speaking, as a nation, is because we don't face death.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we have an incredible revival going on all over the United States right now is because of COVID. COVID it caused us to face death. We had been hiding it. We've moved our old people, our parents, and the sick into old folks' homes and hospitals, and they die there, usually not surrounded by their family members. And then some Christian traditions now even do funerals without the body. That is just nuts. It's just nuts. And it steals from us the very, very important process of mourning and facing death. And it changes you. In the Orthodox tradition, in the Orthodox Christian tradition, the funeral service was written by one of the great theologians of the church. His name is St. John of Damascus. He lived from 650 to 750, an incredible hymnologist, incredible scholar. He actually was a very important political figure at the time that Islam, his father and grandfather, governed the city of Damascus. And when it was taken over by Islam in the 7th century, the Muslims left the Christians in place for about 50 years because Muslims were Bedouin peasants. They didn't have cities. They didn't have development, and they couldn't run a city like Damascus. So they let the Christians do it for about a half a century. And then about 706, that was it. And no more Christians in leadership. And he became a monk at that time, John of Damascus. And he wrote this incredible funeral service for one of his dear brothers. And it's used to this day for the last 13 centuries. And it's a deep reflection on the misery of death, where John is looking into the grave and he is contemplating how horrible it is for a Christian person to die and to see his soul be removed from his body, which is what death is. It's the separation of the soul from the body. It no longer animates the body and it's lifeless. And to see the body decay. And he says it happens to the rich and to the poor exactly the same way. All of the human, differentiations that we make to honor the rich and to neglect all gone, all normalized, all brought to the dust by death. So I don't mean to belabor this, but I think it's important for us. It's important, of course, for the immediate family, for all of Charlie's close family and friends to take their time, not expect that they're going to be able to just bounce back instantaneously and get right back at Turning Point's work. No doubt they will eventually, but I hope that they'll take the time right now to pray, to mourn, to think deeply about the future and about how they can honor Charlie's name. This is my hope.
I think that's such a profound thing to say. And anyone who has been present at the death of loved ones, I think can confirm that it's one of the most powerful and obviously crushingly sad, but also beautiful and inspiring things. I mean, it absolutely changes you. And it's hard to remain an atheist after something like that. And we have been robbed of that experience. So what are the signs of hope that you see now?
I would say before hope, the sorrow of what has happened to Charlie is so illustrative of a descent into a level of violence that, at least in my lifetime, and I'm only 2 years older than you. I was born in 67. I think you were born in 69.
Yes.
You're a San Franciscan. I'm a Angelino, born and raised in Los Angeles. I have never seen anything like this, Tucker. I have never seen anything like the violence that exists today in our towns. When I grew up in Pasadena, as a young boy, I went walking to school. My mother let me stay out every night until the lights went on. When the lights went on, I had to be home for dinner. If I wasn't home for dinner, I was in trouble. But she had no worries. No, in this last period, 10, 15 years, especially, violence has just absolutely exploded. Charlie proposed on the 10th of September. Of course, the next day was the horrible, remembrance of 9/11. He died on 9/10. We have 9/11. This coming December is going to be the 10-year anniversary of the terrible terrorist attack right here in the Inland Empire, just 10 miles from where I am right now, when 14 people were murdered and 22 people wounded by a Pakistani Muslim couple that thought that they would do something for Islam by shooting their co-workers. They were from a mosque 1 mile from me right now. That mosque already had 2 of their members in prison because of terrorist ambitions. My own parish, just 4 months after that, was visited in the middle of a Sunday liturgy by a group of Muslim young men who thought it would be fun to bring bullhorns in the middle of our service and come outside the church and scream Allahu Akbar at our church. And this is, of course, Muslim terrorism. But now we also have this rise of very, very serious leftist violence. And the whole country, I think, is reeling from the assassination attempts on our president and now an attack on Charlie, who wasn't a politician at all.
Yes.
So I would say that if we're going to look for hope, it can't be fake. It can't be fake. We have to assess where we are. And violence has as a sin, violence has a very special, serious place. If you read the patriarchal histories in the opening books of the Bible, if you read Genesis, for instance, chapter 6, this is the account of God regretting that he had made the human race. What could the human being have possibly been doing to make God regret having made us? And the consequence, Moses tells us, is that he sent a worldwide universal flood.
Yes.
Moses articulated the reason. The reason God did that and had to start over with Noah. And in fact, he made Noah a second Adam. He gave the same commission to Noah that he gave to Adam. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, rule it, and subdue it. Why did he do that? It says because the world had become full of violence.
Yes.
When you attack another man, you attack God. Because every human being, as you were just saying so beautifully, is made in the image of God. And so to attack a human is a direct divine offense. Violence is extremely serious. I'm not surprised that we have this level of violence in a culture that murders unborn children at the rate that we do and have sustained it for the decades that we have.
Yes.
Really, is any violence surprising? Do we have hope? That's what you asked me. So forgive me, but that's the background. That is how black it is.
Yes,
that is how black it is. Do we have hope, and what's the future? I would say that without a belief that God is merciful and that He loves the human race and that there's no sin so great that if we repent of it, He will not send His love and forgiveness. Without that belief, certainly we have no future. The statistics are horrible for our country. We are so captured by an ideology that is hopeless. Atheism, strict secularism, which is running our country now. It is extremely hopeless.
Yes.
And without a major reconsideration on the part of our people, a return to classic American virtues, a recovery of Christian faith, without that, certainly we're doomed. But we know from Christian history that repentance is possible. And it usually takes, in a national sense, in a personal sense, it's up to us to repent and to believe. In a national sense, it takes leadership. Leadership that is willing to address the important things at the heart of a national catastrophe. We have been living through national catastrophe. We have lost our faith in God. All of our institutions have been captured by strict secularism. Our law is godless. Our universities exclude God. Our country has gone down a very, very serious, deep hole. If we're going to get out, if we're going to have hope as a nation, we need leadership. Leadership in the likes of George Washington. I think our forebears are ashamed. My grandparents and America, they're ashamed at where we are, Tucker, as a nation. Our relationship to faith, our explicit commitment to God, are excluding Him from everything that's important in American life. We have to repent, and we need someone. Give us, God, someone like a King David. Give us someone like my patron saint, Josiah, who was the last great king of Israel, who himself lived at a terrible time. His father and his grandfather were both awful kings who had completely apostatized, abandoned the heritage of Israel, led the people to copy the pagan practices of the surrounding nations. And forgive me, we're way worse than pagans. I always tell people, look, don't call the secular nonsense that's going on in America pagan. That's an insult to the pagans. The pagans believed in the divine order. They believed in the gods. Okay, we don't believe that there are gods. There's one God. But the pagans at least knew they were accountable to the divine order. They were accountable to the gods, and that they had to live with respect to the wishes of the gods. To call America, which has no reference, most of our leaders make no reference to God at all. They act as though they are not accountable to God's law. And I think that's far, far worse than paganism and a full-blown insult to pagans to call it pagan. No, unless we have a leader who's going to address this, it needs to be addressed, right? Directly. We need to repent, and we need to recover our faith. If we do that, times of refreshing will come from God. We can be changed. A new day can arise, but it's not going to be with a little fix. It's not going to be with a little something here or a little something there. I've never seen, I've been a priest for almost 33 years. I've never seen the radical interest in faith that we're seeing right now. I'll tell you, if I use my parish just as a little example, I have maybe, I don't know, a little more than 1,000 active parishioners that are here regularly. And over the years of my ministry, I've catechized, I've instructed and prepared people for baptism. You know, maybe 20, 30, 40, a really great year would be 40 people. I have over 200 people in catechism right now. And this is happening all across the country. People are moving towards God, moving towards faith. If this continues and it translates into lives that are rooted, lives that are where faith is important, where true repentance has happened, where this quest for just biological life as though that's somehow the sum total of value is rejected. You know, if you study the scriptures, there's 3 types of life that are described in scriptures. There's biological life. In Greek, it's called bios, from where we get biological, right? There's the life of the soul. Many Americans don't even know that that exists. That's called psyche. It's the life, it's the most noble part of you, right? Even the Greek pagans, to use this again, knew that. The body is like a chariot and the soul is like the charioteer, leading the person in nobility so that the body does virtue. The body does something beautiful, right? If you don't think you have psyche, if you think you're just a body and you don't have a soul, which, by the way, is the worldview of the major tech titans of our country. This is why someone as noble as Elon Musk is becoming would stand up and speak to the protesters in England when they were saying, what can we do? What's our future? And he said, what? He said, technology and AI. I promise you, Tucker, technology is not going to save us.
No.
It is not going to save us. And to say that is so hopeless. If we're soulless and we have greater technology, then the soulless are going to use that greater technology to oppress us.
Of course.
We need to affirm what all reasonable human beings in civilized countries, except the modern nuts secular West, if we don't recognize that a human being is more than his body, he has more than bios, more than biological life. He has the life of his soul, psyche, and then there's something that's most important, which is eternal life. Aeonia Zoe, it's called in the scriptures. Eternal life. This is the life of God's kingdom. These are the three fundamental lives. Two of them we have stopped talking about for many decades, and the consequences have been tragic.
What a wonderful explanation. Charlie Kirk was very interested in Orthodoxy, as I'm sure you know. He was knowledgeable on it too. I'm not, but I know that. But I'm interested. But he was very interested in it. Were you aware of that?
He interviewed a friend of mine, Father John Strickland, who's a very respected Orthodox priest and a Russian scholar who's published extensively on Russian history. And Charlie was very interested in that. And I watched that interview and a few comments that he made afterwards, in which he actually got very much into the mind of us Orthodox Christians and explained why so many people are converting to Holy Orthodoxy. And I thought actually he was spot on. Very much spot on. He said people are becoming Orthodox because they want something that is time tested. They want something that's substantial. Yes. They want something that actually informs culture, something that isn't just a plaything and can be categorized over just here. Orthodox Christianity, traditional Christianity in general, it is a lifestyle. It impacts everything because Christ is king, and he's king over every aspect of our life and over civilization. This is common knowledge. Europe, of course, you take a train through Europe. Every town you go through, you're going to go through a town that has the best land given to the church, and the church is going to be the highest building. Because everyone knew, if you don't enthrone worship at the center of your community, if you don't make the heavenly attachment to your earthly life, you're robbing yourself of significance, and you're trivializing yourself to just be limited to time. The best thing that can happen in America is that people go to church, root themselves in the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, because the river of life comes from the altar out the doors of the church and vivifies society. And do we ever need to be vivified today?
Beautiful. Father, thank you. And before you go, I'm gonna spell your name for anyone who's made it to the end of this. I never do this, but I think what you said is so wonderful that I know that people are going to want to follow up. Josiah Trenham, Trenham, senior pastor and director of your church. So I know that people will want to know more about you, and now they can. So thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Keep going, Doctor. Keep going.
Thank you very much. Well, we're gonna, we will keep going. We'll see if this format works. I kind of like it. Thanks a lot for joining us for an hour and 50 minutes. We'll be back soon.
Interesting hearing from Orthodox people. Got some Orthodox friends. Okay, so this is going to be a follow-up also of yesterday's
What's up, everybody?
video
Welcome
with
to a brand new
Candace.
episode of Part of the Problem.
She talked
I am
about
Dave Smith.
releasing
He is Robbie
the Tucker
Fire
content
Bernstein.
and the
How you
Dave
feeling
Smith
today?
content
Out on your
that came
living
from
a nice
the Turning
porch
Point
life. This is Rob. He's
conference.
just always on a porch.
As it
What he's
pertains
doing
to
shows.
Israel.
This is me training at home for.
Menthol saying that, like he tweeted like over 1 million, like it was like an abortion and most thing in mind. And I'll fully disclaim here, Charlie Kirk's a really nice guy. You could chalk a lot of this at any little show. So this was a Charlie Kirk unprompted texted me about the Douglas Murray debate. Now, just this debated Douglas Murray on the Joe Rogan experience. He texted me 2 texts. You know, I just really, like, as a Christian, I had really spiritual experiences when I went to Israel and stood in the exact place where Jesus performed miracles and all this. And I really value the holy sites being protected and the bond between, you know, the Jewish people, like Jesus was a Jew and like all that. And I was like, okay, I get all of that. But like, also we could do that without genociding our neighbors, right? Probably. And like he'd kind of laugh and say, now, if I'm being completely honest, I got the impression that Charlie really kind of knew I was right. If I'm being completely honest, that's how I felt. But I got nothing tangible I could point to justify that feeling. All I could tell you is that in the room, I kind of felt like he knows I got a really good point here, but he's kind of not in a position where he can admit it. That's how I felt. But that is purely just a vibe I got. There was nothing he said that actually backed up that was his feel. Remember at one point, he was like interested in talking to me about like how I'm good on borders and abortion and most libertarians are bad on that. And then we got into a whole conversation about how libertarian first principles lead you to not being for open borders. And it was just like other stuff that wasn't that topic. It was kind of like a thing where Charlie had been saying, and I think I talked about this the week we did a podcast with like my thoughts on the event right after the event, but once Josh Hammer came in the room, Charlie had been stressing the whole time how he really wanted a good faith exchange of ideas. And he didn't want this to devolve into name calling or be anything, and that he really wanted to have a good, honest exchange between me and Josh. And so I said yes, and Josh said the same thing. Josh said absolutely yes. And so then we all the three of us had a very pleasant conversation, and we ended up talking about other topics. And I think part of that was just like, to keep it light and friendly in the green room. Like, we're about to go out there and debate this topic, so let's just talk about immigration, where we all agree for a little bit before we go out there. Then, as I pointed out before, Josh Hammer goes out, and by the end of his opening statement, he said he was disgusted to be on the stage with me. And I had pointed out like what a snake behavior that was, because literally we had just had like a 40-minute pleasant conversation. Like, we were all being friends. And then he got out there and said he was disgusted to be in my presence or whatever. Anyway, then I wiped the floor with Josh Hammer, and that's how the thing ended. So I didn't really have anything, when Candace was like, come forward with whatever information you have. I was just, as I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't really have anything there. But then I did think to myself, I was like, oh, like me and Charlie Kirk get texted a fair amount of times over the years. Like, let me go back and just see what we said exactly. Because I remember he had gone out of his way to like text nice stuff. And I said this publicly before too, that was our relationship essentially, that he just started reaching out to me. I had done his podcast a time or two, I believe. And he would just text me like nice things before. And then he invited me to that Turning Point event. So I will say, first of all, very weird feeling going back through the text messages of someone when they just died. Just there's something about that that's kind of surreal and not a nice feeling. But I did that. And then I did find a couple text messages that I think are kind of relevant to this part of the conversation. I just want to make it clear, I'm not stoking anything that says Israel did it, but just if we're having the conversation about where was Charlie's state of mind and how did he feel about Israel, these are, I think, kind of relevant. And let me just start by saying this, because I was a little torn about whether or not I should read these. I've never done that before. I've never read private text messages or released, like when people do that sometimes when they're arguing with someone, like they'll release screenshots of DMs or something like that. I never have done that in my life, or I don't think so. And I don't like that. I think like that, like things that are said privately should stay private. But just like in this case, it does seem like this is like, I don't know, it's like the biggest political assassination of our lifetimes. And this is a huge debate over where his state of mind was. And I do think that a lot of the fucking Zionists are kind of lying when they act like, no, Charlie was just the biggest, like he was just Ben Shapiro and nothing else was going on in his head. That doesn't seem to be quite right. Now, I've talked about this quite a bit, that I thought the big dynamic going on here was that he still needed these kids. He still needed his young activists, and they were abandoning Israel. But I actually forgot about exactly what he said in a couple of these things. So I'll read them just to be fully transparent. You guys can make of it what you will. I think I already know what a lot of you are going to make of it, but this is real. And this is what was said to me. So here, let me, because I took a couple screenshots of these, but let me just actually read up through them, because these are the ones that I thought were relevant. I mean, there's some other texts here where it's just, I mean, he texted me saying he really loved my testimony on Tucker Carlson about praying to God in the hospital when my daughter was born and stuff, but this just doesn't seem as relevant. But these two texts I thought were pretty relevant. So this one is from Sunday, April 13th at 8:01 p.m. He texts me, listen to you on Rogan. Now, this is like a day or two after the Douglas Murray debate. So I debated Douglas Murray on the Joe Rogan experience, and it was a big show. At the time, it was a big show. I guess Candace Owens changed the definition of big show at this point. In hindsight, a teeny little show. So this was a Charlie Kirk, unprompted, texted me about the Douglas Murray debate. Now, just like kind of keeping in mind, and I'll fully disclaim here, Charlie Kirk's a really nice guy. You could chalk a lot of this up to him being nice. But the Douglas Murray debate with me, you know, like I'm not overstating it. This was like a big thing. This may have been the biggest high profile debate on Israel. And this is what Charlie Kirk wrote to me Sunday, April 13th at 8:01 p.m. Listen to you on Rogan. You did well, despite me being more on the pro-Israel side. Very little I disagree with what you said. One point, when Douglas was going on about you using arguments from authority, it's a ridiculous claim. You were using original source quotes to prove their motives, all capital and motives, not their analysis of geopolitics, etc. Two totally different things. You were right on that point 100%. Keep up the good work. Hope to cross paths at some point soon. I'm sorry, hope to cross paths at some point. And I wrote back, thanks, Charlie. I really appreciate that. Now, again, I'm not saying anyone should make any more of this than there is there, but like, this is Charlie Kirk. He told me privately that there was very little that he disagreed with. And if you go listen to what I said on that show, I was going pretty hard. And so I will say, like, you know, Candace calling on me to like release what I know. That is one. And I think that's not completely insignificant. Like, I think that does at least demonstrate that this wasn't Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro was not sending me this text message. Let's just say that. You know, I mean, I don't want anyone to make too much of this. I'm just kind of putting the information out there. I guess we've already established you're going to make of it what you will. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Crowd Health, an amazing company that I've been telling you about for many years, a great alternative to the broken health insurance system. If you could get health care for under $100 a month, would you want that? Would you be interested? Let me tell you about what Crowd Health has just introduced. You can finally rid yourself of the bureaucracy of the healthcare system and take agency over your own health, because Crowd Health has just introduced the Black Swan membership. It's the healthcare alternative for people who want autonomy over their care, their costs, and their lifestyle. They just need a little help with the Black Swan events that happen in life. Well, now for just $95 a month, you get access to a team of health bill negotiators, low-cost prescriptions, and lab testing tools, and a database of low-cost, high-quality doctors vetted by Crowd Health. You stay in control without insurance and their networks dictating your care. And what if something major happens? You pay the first $15,000, and then the Crowd steps in to help fund the rest. It feels like the options that we used to have before Obamacare messed everything up. And now, if you use the promo code POTP, it's only $80 for the first 3 months. Just go to joincrowdhealth.com and use the promo code POTP. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. All right, let's get back into the show. Here's the other one that I thought was kind of worth what. So he sent me like a tweet that he had posted, which was back about here. So he this is public, right? So you can see this, but he sent it to me. So he quote tweeted me a post that I had about the murder of those two Israeli embassy staff members. If you remember that, Rob, you remember that story? They got murdered in DC or something like that. And I just had a post about, like, you know, how wrong political violence is and how anyone who thinks you're helping the poor Palestinians by murdering some embassy workers, you're not. And then Charlie had a long quote tweet to that, which this is public. If you want to find it, it starts with their names, which were Sarah Milgram and Yuran Lichinsky. And he says they were two beautiful young people with their whole lives ahead of them. Talks about how the murder was senseless and evil and horrifying. It's a little bizarre to read that in the context of today, but then he had a a whole section of the post where he said, I must push back against one thing. All over X, I see claims that some people have, quote, blood on their hands. By the way, this is just a really interesting tweet. I haven't read this till right now. I didn't click on it. But he sent me it in our text thread. But this is Charlie Kirk, by the way, talking about this stuff, pretty relevant to today. He said, I must push back against one thing. All over X, I see claims that some people have, quote, blood on their hands simply because they've made tweets attacking Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israel government, or the war in Gaza. No. And then he goes off on a whole thing. You can look up the tweet if you want to say it, but he's making the point that it was horrible what happened to them, but it's also messed up to like blame anybody who was criticizing Israel for now being responsible for them doing this. So he sent me that tweet. And I responded back as he sent me this at noon on May 22nd, and I responded back at 12:01. I said, I was literally reading it as you texted. And I said, thank you. I really appreciate that. We need cooler heads to prevail here. It's a very dangerous situation. And he said, totally. And then he said, we should do a podcast in person and have a fun, lighthearted, contrasting conversation on Israel. I bet we actually agree on most of it, truly. I will, and then he said, I will not scold you for not being. So he made a never been joke. And then I said, I'm going to need that in writing. And then he said, screenshot it. And okay, I didn't actually plan on screenshotting that or reading that aloud ever at any point. So look, that's all I have. That's all that I actually know about any of this. The truth is that all of the kind of stuff that Candace is talking about, all of this coming to a head, the pressure being put on Charlie Kirk doing that interview with Megyn Kelly talking about the pressure, all this stuff about like the meeting with Ackman and all these guys. This all happens after that, and I never talked to Charlie again. Which I really, regret in hindsight, but that happens a lot when we lose people. But I hadn't talked to him. It hasn't been that long. This was only, in the last couple of months. So I can't speak to any of that. But I did feel like it was worth pointing that out, that, again, this doesn't prove anything at all. Charlie was a really nice guy. And I know this from just having met him, the one time in person and then other times like over the computer. And so maybe he was just trying to be nice and extend an olive branch and kind of keep like a dialogue going there. I mean, this is Charlie Kirk, and that is kind of what he was all about, is keeping dialogue going. And even when he was inviting me on his podcast, which, okay, so by the way, the story there is that never ended up happening. But so then essentially what happened was he goes, why don't you come on my podcast? The invite I just read you. I was like, absolutely, let's do it. Then he was like, oh, do you want to do a debate at this big event that we're having coming up here? And then I was like, okay, cool. So we'll do that. And then he was like, okay, we'll kill two birds with one stone, and we'll do the debate, and me and you will do a podcast. That was the original plan. And then like, I couldn't come in till the last day of the conference. We were out in Denver that weekend, and I had to fly from Denver straight down there. And there wasn't enough time to do both, I guess, or something like that. So like the podcast didn't end up happening. But so even when he was inviting me on that podcast, he's saying like, we disagree, you know what I mean? But he's also going, I think you'd be surprised by how much we agree. And on the Douglas Murray podcast, he's saying, I think I actually agreed with much of what you had to say. So anyway, that's my response to Candace. That's all I got. I don't have any other useful information that's relevant to here, but at least the little bit I have, I think does indicate that, like, yeah, there was certainly, Charlie was at the very least, at least what he's saying here, is that he was listening to, obviously he was listening to what I had to say. Obviously, he had been listening to what Candace had to say. Obviously, he had been listening to what Tucker had to say. And he probably was feeling like, a lot of that does make sense. It doesn't mean he agrees with it fully, but I would offer that to say I do think there is some evidence that Charlie was struggling with this topic, thinking about this topic, finding some common ground with the very harsh critics of Israel, and was at the very least, like, it's not the case that this guy was just a pure loyal supporter who wasn't questioning the thing at all. I will say that much. Any thoughts on any of this, Rob?
So Israel did do it. That's what I just learned.
There you go.
After all these assassination attempts that country's already made, Dave Smith confirms.
Listen, I can't confirm it. They already got to me. Now, listen, dude, I promise you guys, by the way, if I'm ever like threatened or spooked or something like that, I won't like lie to you. Maybe I won't answer the question, but I won't just lie to you. No, I have not gotten the call. I have not been threatened. And no, I don't fear for my safety, really. I mean, any more than just, the way that anyone else would fear for myself. Like, you're like, shit, Charlie Kirk got taken out. I hope more people don't. I don't know. I'm in a much more controlled environment. I don't really do big outdoor events like that, which are less controlled. But no, I'm not like I'm not like worried to say what the truth is here. I'm just trying to not rush to judgment and trying to get it right. But anyway, I did think, as Candace asked about that, I was like, I sent her those screenshots too, because I was just kind of like, well, look, in the effort to like, let's get to the bottom of all of this here, I'm happy to, I won't voluntarily give over information to the government, but I'll voluntarily give it over to Candace Owens anytime. So I was like, here, look, I don't think, Charlie was much closer with Candace than he was with me. So I don't think he was saying anything to me that like he didn't trust her with. And I also did feel like, hey, this is somewhat relevant. It's not like he was telling me stuff about like his marriage or something and I'm like revealing personal things. It's like, this is the topic of conversation now, is where was this guy here? I have not like a huge smoking gun or anything like that, but like I have a little bit of evidence of what his state of mind was. So I felt like it was the right move to share that.
I listened to quite a bit of the Candace thing, and I will say I'd like to see. I'm not saying any of it's wrong. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying any of it's wrong. I'd like to see a little bit more receipts on the accusations, such as that Ackman threatened or that Netanyahu.
Well, did you see Ackman responded?
I think he responded that he had receipts and he was going to show them, and he hasn't done so yet.
Yeah, but even just that, I thought was kind of great in a way. Like, I just think it's great that Candace got him on the record, because now it's kind of like, okay, yeah, get him talking more and more. Because now let's see, like, what, you know what I mean? Like, let's try to put together the story here. Like, I don't know exactly what I'll say this, right? And I think I talked all about this in our episodes. Anyone can go back if you want to. We did, I think, an entire episode on my experience at that turning point debate and what it was like. Now, at the time, we were just talking about how the kids were moved in such a direction and what the debate was like and stuff. But I'll just say this, because so Josh Hammer now, who happens to be the guy who was there for part of the time, when the only time I ever met Charlie Kirk face to face. So now I debated Josh Hammer at Princeton University. What was that? Last year, I think. Or was it earlier this year? I can't remember.
I think it was during
anymore.
the winter, because I was going to go, and then there was a crazy snowstorm.
It was 100% during the winter, because I left into a crazy snowstorm and my Uber kept canceling on me, and I really had a moment. Yeah, it sucked. But anyway, yes, I finally got in a car. Anyway, yes, it was definitely in the winter. Okay, so I debated Josh Hammer at Princeton, smoked him, and but it was a totally like a civil debate. I mean, he did that one thing where he tried to be like, who do you trust Osama bin Laden more than Benjamin Netanyahu or something? But like, aside from that, it was just a civil debate where we just calmly debated the issues, which it actually is what I prefer in these debates, despite how many shit shows I've been a part of. I actually like when we could just argue the issues in like an academic, setting. And anyway, so that was, it went great for me. And I was very happy with it, but I left that thinking Josh was nothing but a good dude. And at the end of the debate, I went over to him and I said something like, I was like, hey man, we should let's do a podcast together sometime about some stuff we agree on, like immigration or wokeism or something like that. And he went, yeah, absolutely. And we left kind of on cordial, nice terms. Then Josh was so what Charlie was at first, he said, we'll do the podcast. Then he was like, why don't you come do a debate? Then he wanted me to debate, what's his name? Oh man, I'm blanking on his name. But he's the UFC guy who was in the military. Tim Kennedy. He wanted me to debate Tim Kennedy. And I accepted that. I went, okay. And I'm an MMA fan, so I was always like a fan of Tim Kennedy. So I was like, okay, I'll debate Tim Kennedy. I think that could be a good one. And then Tim couldn't do it for like scheduling reasons or something like that. And he goes, well, what do you think about Josh Hammer? And I initially said no to Charlie on that because in my mind, I was like, well, I don't know. I already debated that guy. Like I already debated that guy, and that's been dealt with. Like, give me a new, person to, because it's hard to like kind of get excited about just doing the same thing that you already did. And then Charlie Kirk was like, yeah, dude, but this is going to be in front of the Turning Point audience at our biggest event of the year. And this is going to just be much bigger numbers. And a lot of other people will see this. And then when he said that, I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I guess like that. Yeah, it makes sense. And these are really the people I want to talk to are like the young people. So that's, so that I was just like, okay, yeah, we'll come do this. And that's how that. So anyway, so I was like, whatever. Then he started stressing. He put all three of us on a text message, and he just started stressing. Like, if you could read that text message, the entire thread was just him going like, okay, guys, here are the topics I want to cover. And I was like, sure, sounds good. And then he goes, I really want this to be a good faith thing and like above board and no insults. And then Josh went, absolutely. That's what I want to. And then I just said with certainty, because we had already had such a good faith debate the first time, I went, dude, you don't got to worry about that with me and Josh. Everything will be cool, blah, blah, blah. And then we just hung out in the green room. Like I said, he was the nicest guy the whole time. We're like, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to have a friendly debate. And his opening statement before I've spoken was, I'm disgusted to be on stage with Dave, and reading my text message. Like he pulls out this thing. And so anyway, all I'm saying is that I just went, oh, that dude's a snake. He's a really dishonest fucking person who's very comfortable lying. And I just couldn't imagine. I could imagine being pissed off at someone, but I couldn't imagine sitting there with someone being nothing but polite and cordial and joking around, talking about family, talking about politics, talking about all this stuff, and then getting on stage and going, I'm disgusted to be in this man's presence. Like there's something that's very dishonest and womanly about that. And so when it comes out that Josh Hammer was also at this meeting, I'll just say, I don't trust him for shit that he says about that. That's all. Now that debate was the one in the summer, was the second debate. But anyway, so that's all I'll say is that guy's a liar. So I don't trust his words there. Bill Ackman, I'm not trusting what he says either. So the more you get him talking about it, the more like he's on the record saying this. This is like why in a police investigation, they go, why don't you come downtown and answer some questions? Like before they've even got anything, they want to get more, because now if you say anything that's a lie, we can look into that. We can see what you're trying to cover up. So I thought it was great that she got him responding. Now, look, what was really the deal there? I don't know. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Prolon, a plant-based nutrition program featuring soups, snacks, and beverages designed to nourish the body while keeping it in a fasting state, triggering cellular rejuvenation and renewal. This is really an incredible system they have here. So like everybody, you guys have heard all about these fasting diets. And it's all the rage these days because there's lots of positive, benefits for your body, with fasting. But now you can get those positive benefits without actually having to give up food. That's what you get with Prolon. Their next gen builds on the original Prolon, the actual and the confirm, I will say, which is, I have seen confirmed by more sources. Now, again, this is not the thing, because it's important to remember all these things. The claim that Charlie believed Israel was going to kill him is, we're relying on one guy at InfoWars from that. And like, forgive me, all right, whatever the internet comments, you can all, yes, I got the call, but I'm going to need a little bit more than that. And sorry. And I know that everybody has the view of InfoWars that Alex Jones was right about everything, but he was actually wrong about a whole lot of things. And I'm sorry, but when you work at an organization that is known for making wild claims that you cannot possibly back up, Alex Jones literally made documentaries about how they were going to start depopulating the earth. It's 25 years ago, still hasn't happened. So I guess it's coming, but that's okay. There's one source. But the idea that
there are two sources.
the idea that he turned down a big chunk of money from Netanyahu is not just one source. There are several people who are saying this is the case. That is an interesting wrinkle in the story. Again, I'm not arguing, none of this proves that Israel did it, but it is interesting to establish. And look, not just because
InfoWars.
It's not just because
person
of the
he's
fact
talking
that
about is
people
Harrison
are
Smith,
thinking about this
who
conspiracy
like a month
theory
before had said,
although I do think
that there's a source close to Charlie
that's just going to happen, no matter
that
what
said
any
that
of
Charlie
us
was
say.
afraid that Israel was
That's
going to kill
fine.
him.
But it's not just that; it's also that, you know, Charlie Kirk was a really important figure. There is something about when people die young, it just has an impact on all of us. You know, we all lionize people who die young. You know, the truth is that Martin Luther King and JFK were not nearly the perfect angels that our society makes them out to be. They were both deeply flawed human beings with deep personal failings. They weren't angels, but they did die young. And when you die young, you get lionized. And who you were as a person, what your legacy is, what you're remembered as, becomes very important. And that's part of the reason why you see Netanyahu trying to use this right away. Here's an image of Charlie Kirk with Israel. You associate all the feelings you have with Charlie Kirk with the Israeli flag. You know what I mean? Like, people try to use that. And if there is this like discussion of what the man really was or what he really stood for, then like I think this stuff is important. It's important to know what really was going on. And what, you know, when Candace says that she knows for a fact that Netanyahu is blatantly lying by omission when he read that letter that Charlie had written to him, I believe her on that. And I do believe that I think it's unlikely that Charlie Kirk was expressing to me having doubts or expressing to me agreeing with much of what I'm saying, which, like, Jesus, I mean, I go pretty hard on this stuff. If you're agreeing with much of what I'm saying, then you're having doubts about the pro-Israel side. And it does seem to me to be like there's a strong case for that. Now, Candace is talking about a meeting where she was not there, from what I understand. Bill Ackman is saying, no, it wasn't like that at all. This wasn't like a contentious thing. It wasn't an intervention. We discussed lots of issues. I do also, you know, the thing that lends a lot of credibility to what Candace was saying, in my view here, is that, because this is why I was urging people to wait till we get more information, because more of a picture starts to emerge. But the meeting that they're talking about takes place like a couple days before that Megyn Kelly interview. And when he goes and talks to Megyn Kelly, he is talking about how blown away he is by how high the temperature is on this thing and how much the pro-Israel side is snapping back at him just for the crime of, as him and Megyn Kelly say, the crime of moderating a debate, hosting Tucker Carlson. Not even anything that you know what I mean? And it just jives with Candace's story a lot more than it jives with Bill Ackman's story. But I do wonder, like, what was that like? You know, I'm sure I know Josh and them were bitter about it afterward. I don't know why he agreed to do it. And this is always, and I said this at the time too, or I definitely said this to you privately, Rob, a bunch. But like, I also I thought I did wonder at the time, like, why is Charlie Kirk setting me up to look so good here? You know, like, he booked me. It was the final event of his biggest event of the year. And he ran a one-on-one debate and had me go against someone who I had already smoked, who I was kind of like guaranteed to do again. And it did seem like he was setting me up to succeed here. It's certainly, like, all I'm saying is, like, I don't think at a Ben Shapiro event, there is no chance he ever would have booked the final thing to be a debate one-on-one between me and Josh Hammer. He would not have booked. Number one, he wouldn't have me at the event. He would never consider having me at the event. And if he was going to, he wouldn't set me up in a situation where I could end up looking good and winning the day. Charlie did do that. Charlie also is here, talking when there was all of that hysteria going on. What was the tone of a meeting between a bunch of hardcore Zionists, you know what I mean? Like hardcore Zionist activists and Charlie Kirk? I imagine it was pretty tense. And then we have Charlie going on an interview the next day talking about how tense all this shit was. And so I don't know. I just tend to. So, okay, you don't have me convinced with this Israel done it theory yet, because I don't think you have a theory or any evidence. But if we're talking about the Charlie was going through an evolution on this topic theory, that I think has some real legs on it. Any thoughts on any of that, Rob?
All sounds fine to me. The only thing that stands out slightly contradictory is I did feel like when I watched the debate, he was interjecting fairly, but with clarifying questions that had much more of a trying to protect the Israel narrative kind of bent to them.
Okay, it's either that or it's protecting himself. Like going, hey, I'm not the one saying this. Just to be clear, I'm not the one saying this here, but the guy I'm hosting over here is the one saying this. Again, nothing that I'm presenting here at all is conclusive at all. I'm just telling you all the information I have. But the big question does become now, right? As we alluded to this yesterday, and of course you have this Pam Bondi clip, which by the way, let's play that. The big question now is what, well, of course, look, there's several big questions, but perhaps the most important question is what actually does come of this? Who does, while you have so many people competing over how to use this for their own political advantage, like what actually does end up coming of this? And I will say that if, like somebody, oh man, I can't remember who had thrown this out. I thought I saw like someone who I follow on Twitter had proposed like a federal holiday for Charlie Kirk that would be like debate day, where we have like an open discussion of ideas and we honor his legacy about like, the need for debate and conversation. And like, I was like, oh yeah, I really like the idea of that. And then other people are like, because of Charlie Kirk, we should shut down hate speech. And I would just really caution against people going down that road, which, by the way, seems to be damn near the polar opposite of the first proposal, which seemed like a much better way to honor Charlie Kirk. But let's play this clip, Rob, that you sent over, because I did think this was worth discussing. But here's Pam Bondi talking about, hate speech.
Level, the anti-Semitism, what's been happening in college
We've covered this
around this country is disgusting.
hate speech,
despicable,
antithetical to Charlie Kirk, really antithetical to America.
Right, and we're not going to stop.
Don't need to see this.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech, and there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society. Do you see?
All right,
go for our guy Eric.
One French fry equals the toxicity of one cigarette. Doctors do learn what dietitians learn, but that's very limited. What we do learn
I was just clicking on this to get to the channel, and you're already coming at our French fries.
Had an entire organization.
Hopefully that's just
with the devil,
from fast
which they
food.
Did. Kids born in the year 2000 were going to live to be 120, and I was like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a health catastrophe unfold.
So today I invited Dr. Cate Shanahan to talk about an important topic, seed oils. So welcome, Dr. Cate. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, we're talking about seed oils.
Thank you so much,
I
Eric,
didn't even know we
because
were
this is
talking about
such an
seed
important
oils.
topic, and I am so delighted to be able to speak about this with you.
I was thinking we were talking about French fries.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring you on is because you're basically the first person to really bring this kind of mainstream, this really important point on some of the dangers of seed oils. But I just want to very quickly give us a little summary on, you graduated in 1994, right?
Yes, from medical school, yes.
Medical school. So In school, I'm sure they don't probably give you a lot of information on nutrition or even food therapy, right? Am I correct?
We had a nutrition course. We learn what dietitians learn. Doctors do learn what dietitians learn, but that's very limited. What we do learn is most of it is not true. So I'm sure you've had people discussing before. Salt doesn't cause hypertension. Fat doesn't make you fat. Sugar's not the ideal fuel for our cells. So, most of what we learn about nutrition is actually misinformation. And so it's dangerous. And so doctors are actually dangerous when if you're trusting your doctor's nutrition advice, you're going to end up sick.
Yeah, even if they bring up the topic, because I don't even remember any doctor that I've ever been to ask me, okay, so the first question is, what have you been eating?
Yeah, they'll bring it up, if your cholesterol is high, which isn't actually a problem, that it's a problem they've invented. Like they'll bring it up under limited circumstances, but the medical doctrine is not to look for real root causes. And so that's what really lights a fire under my parts about getting the word out here, because if we could get to the root cause, we can fix everything. And I've seen it happen, hundreds of times personally and thousands of testimonials now, as I'm sure you have since you give similar advice. But the degree of, how powerful it is and just how much we can prevent. It's just so exciting. And it's so simple if you boil it down the way that I do in my latest book, Dark Calories.
I got your book, and it just is, I love the title of the book, Dark Calories, because it just pulled me right. I'm like, oh, what's that all about, right? So I have a series of questions I want to ask you, and I want to dissect this topic, starting from how can you possibly take seed oils, which is very unstable? What do they do to preserve it?
So the oil actually is problematic because they initiate the formation of toxins, and that there is no preservation. What's happening is invisible toxicity is developing in the bottle. Most of us can't even detect what would be a signal that these oils are no good, which is called rancidity, which is different from oxidation. It's oxidation.
So it's not. So these oils are not necessarily. Are they rancid or are they oxidized?
They are both.
Okay.
And it depends on the time frame you're talking about. So the oils that are bad are all seed oils that have these unstable fatty acids, as you mentioned, but they have also been refined, bleached, and deodorized. And all of the stabilizing factors that were in the seed that makes the seeds actually even nutritious in some cases, those are stripped away as part of the refining. The reason that there's no rancidity actually is part of the refining too. That's a necessary part of the refining. And it's actually the free fatty acids that make it rancid. So things like olive oil can also go rancid, right? But they take a longer time because they've got the stabilizing factors and they've got the better fatty acids. But it's just the problem with these oils is the lack of any nutritional value pretty much whatsoever. There's very few.
In nature, you have these seeds that have protective factors. So we're removing all that stuff. And in the industrial process, what are some of the stages that you go through? You mentioned like bleaching and things, but what do they actually do to turn the seed into this oil?
Well, the first thing they do is they create a crude oil using a lot of heat and pressure that extracts the oil. And this process can be done with what they call cold pressing. Once it's kick-started, you cannot stop it. So these toxins will continue to develop and multiply and even change. Like some toxins that are there at day 2 after refining are gone by day 14. And then when you cook with them, you get more toxins. When you reheat it, you get more toxins. So by the time you've made say a French fry, which is cooked in, regular French fry from a fast food joint, continuously heated for a few days or weeks, the average French fry contains as much as smoking a cigarette. One French fry equals the toxicity of one cigarette.
This is just absolutely crazy.
What? Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So that's how they multiply. I mean, so this multiplication problem is real.
Could we relate this to free radical exposure or not? Is this just a different type of toxicity?
Free radicals are definitely involved. They're involved in the process of creating the toxins because oxidation and, free radicals are kind of slightly different, but very similar in that they destroy our cellular membranes. They destroy our cellular health, both of them, oxidation and free radicals. If you have oxidation, you're going to get free radicals. If you have free radicals, you're going to get oxidation.
So when we're consuming this seed oil, what is it actually doing to our membranes?
The toxins that form in the bottle, that form when we cook with seed oils, that form in our foods when we cook with seed oils, those toxins have the capacity to damage our cell, and it just will not function because these oxidation reactions are the very thing that triggers the inflammatory response system. You see this on your skin, right? With sunburn, actually, is the simplest form of visible membrane oxidation damage. And it happens worse when you have a high seed oil diet because a little bit of toxicity, a little bit of oxidation reaction becomes unstoppable on a high seed oil diet because of how it affects us. There's so many other consequences that, I have to write separate chapters about each of these. It's just unbelievable. But the good news is that means it's the most powerful lever by which you can improve your health. And none of this is something that I learned in medical school, let me go without saying, right? This is all stuff I had to figure out because I wanted to be able to help my patients, really, truly help them. And I didn't feel like drugs were doing much.
What initially got you to start looking outside the box? Was there something that occurred?
I met a family, a 4-generation Hawaii family, and the grandmother this is the great-grandmother who had brought in her great-grandson. And she was in her 80s and in stellar health. Her chart was about 5 pages thick, coming in for, tetanus shots and stitches. And her great-grandson was just 10, but he was on 3 daily medications, had thick bottleneck glasses, braces, lots of chronic allergies, chronic learning disorder problems. The dominant narrative was we had just spent the 20th century expanding our longevity. At the beginning, it was like 40 years. By the end, it was 77 on average. They were predicting that kids born in the year 2000 were going to live to be 120. And I was like, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a health catastrophe unfold right before my eyes. I'm a family practice doctor. So that's why I was caring for all these different generations. And I knew the family intimately. And I was like, I had just met the great-grandson. And that was the tipping point because I'm like, this is wrong. And I've got to get to the bottom of this. And I also had my own health problems, my own health challenges that had kind of just spurred me to start looking into nutrition as well. And so I felt like I needed to get to the truth because the narrative was saturated fat was the problem. And so I was like, okay, so what is doing this to us? Is it just the deprivation of nutrients like Weston Price talked about? Or is there something else going on? And 2 halves of my life came together because before I went to medical school, I was a biochemist. I went to Cornell for biochemistry to get a PhD and move into trying to figure out the connections. And really, there wasn't anything. I couldn't just read something that existed. I had to use the understanding of biochemistry that I had gained before going to medical school and then kind of push that into what I learned about medicine to create basically a whole new way of thinking about the root cause of disease. And that's what I've been writing about for like 14, 15 years now.
Wow. On top of this heart healthy seed oils, so you're thinking, oh yeah, it's fine. That's just been ingrained in our minds. How can they claim that?
The doctors don't know that the data that supports that claim was bought and sold by Procter & Gamble, who funded the American Heart Association, the entire organization. There have been doctors who, like individual doctors throughout history, who were willing to, take money and say whatever, say cigarettes are healthy. That happened repeatedly. But never before in history, to my knowledge, had an entire organization done the deal with the devil, which they did. The person who stepped up to basically defend seed oils is Ansel Keys. And Ansel Keys had this big idea that saturated fat clogged our arteries, but polyunsaturates being liquid wouldn't. I mean, really, it was really that simplistic and frankly stupid idea. That's not how the body works. He wasn't a medical doctor, but he went around the world with all this money that Procter & Gamble gave him, creating just reams and reams of paperwork that passes for evidence because nobody reads it. Like when I look at it and when I read it myself, I was like, I can't believe this stuff ever got published. It's basically random musings and rantings. There's nothing systematic about it, and it contradicts itself because there's other authors who disagreed with Keys because he was kind of a jerk. And he was trying to gaslight everybody that was working with him into going along with his theory, but the evidence wasn't showing his theory was right.
Wasn't there another book called The Prudent Diet that was pushed at that time?
The American Heart Association got behind this other doctor who was promoting his diet book, which was full of seed oils and margarine, because he saw the trend coming, right? He was they were interconnected buddies, and he was like, oh, okay, great. So this is the trend. So let's jump on this trend. I'm going to write a book that basically the American Heart Association, supported. There was mutual interest. They supported each other. And it became wildly popular to avoid saturated fats thanks to that book, which again, no evidence, but it was so promoted and popular that it radically changed what Americans ate forever.
This is going to go down in history, unfortunately. I don't know when there's going to be class action suits. Trans fats have been around for like 100 years, and they finally says, okay, now it's bad after 90 years. My goal is just on a grassroots level to get people to be aware of this and start to avoid it and do the alternative things. But what about the relationship between seed oils and insulin resistance? Is there a connection there?
This is so important. And this is what I call my energy model of insulin resistance, because insulin resistance is nearly ubiquitous in this country. Something close to 99% of the population was found to be insulin resistant on a large survey done in the year 2006, and it's probably worse. But nobody knows what the root cause of insulin resistance is. And people are talking about it being carbohydrates. And I would say that that's not what the science suggests. It boils down to the fact that your body fat, when you've been filling it up with the polyunsaturates from seed oils, does not give your mitochondria the fuel that they need. And it can actually hurt your mitochondria.
I just want to just pause there because this is like very interesting. We consume fats, we consume carbs that turn into fats, but seed oils, people assume, well, they're just burned up as energy, right? Just burned up just like any other fuel.
Right.
But that's not true.
That's not true.
Wow. So they get stored somewhere in the fat cell or something, and our bodies can't use it effectively, or?
They get stored in the fat cells. That's exactly right.
Wow.
And because of the amount that the average person is eating now, where 80% of their fat calories are coming from seed oils.
What percentage?
80% of our fat calories are coming from seed oils. Now, it's not all polyunsaturates. It doesn't mean our body fat is that many polyunsaturates, but it has way more, right? It has normally, historically, somewhere around 5%, maybe less. Some people say more, but somewhere around 5% historically. And now people have something like 20, 30, 40%, We've changed the chemistry of the largest organ in our body, our adipose fat tissue. And it's making us crave foods that will raise our sugar because that's an alternative fuel, right? So just our cells are like, well, fat's not working for us. They don't know from polyunsaturated or whatever, but they do know another fuel is glucose, always in our bloodstream. And that's the key to understanding this connection between seed oils and obesity, and seed oils and insulin resistance, and seed oils and all metabolic diseases.
Wow.
Right? That's the key.
You know, I'm developing an app to pick up and scan and be able to identify seed oils and foods because it's in mayonnaise, it's in dressings, it's in pretty much all the restaurants. You can't find a restaurant without them cooking something in seed oil.
Yes, so that's why in the back of Dark Calories, I give people a script to say to different restaurants in different settings. Like I help you navigate this because it is a minefield. The entire world wants to shove these oils down your throat. They don't care. It's cheap. There's all these excuses they use, high smoke point, neutral, nobody's allergic to it, like peanut oil, for example. And, so it's everywhere. And, you have to have your defenses ready. So that's what the last third of the book, Dark Calories, does, is it gives you the defenses you need to protect your health and your family's health, your children's health, everybody you care about.
If a person is trying to figure out what to replace it with, can you give us some ideas on what are some safe oils that we could cook with?
Yeah, so I have my favorite 5, but I list a delightful dozen in the book. So my favorite 5 are olive oil, butter, coconut oil, peanut oil, and sesame oil. There's so many choices, and these things are delicious, right? It makes your food taste better. Because the other thing about these dishes, peanut oil, favorite 5 are olive oil, butter, coconut oil, peanut oil, and sesame oil. There's so many choices, and these things are delicious, right? It makes your food taste better. Because the other thing about these deodorized oils and being refined is they have no flavor agents in them. And what they do, since they're so slippery and wiggly, these polyunsaturates that are flexible, breakable molecules, they totally coat your taste buds. So they actually kind of can make it harder for you to taste other things.
Wow. I didn't know that. If someone stops consuming seed oils, how long does it take to get it out of your fat cell or your body? Is it possible over time?
It is absolutely possible. And it takes a while because we're talking about, exchanging pounds of molecules, right? So the estimates are somewhere around a year and a half. A lot of people do focus on, oh my God, I don't want these things in my body. And I have to wait a year and a half. That makes people feel panicky and, they want to try all kinds of unproven detox methods and stuff like that. You don't need to, because you are going to be able to help your mitochondria to improve your energy and all the good things, reverse insulin resistance. Starting from day 1, you start to improve your mitochondrial function because the foods that I recommend in Dark Calories give your mitochondria energy. They help you get energy. And the other thing that they do is they help support your body's antioxidant system, which is so important, so that your mitochondria aren't quite so susceptible to, shutting down from burning a little bit of PUFA, a little bit of the polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? And so we really need to eat a diet that helps our body create our own antioxidant enzymes from scratch. It's enzymes that we need, which are biological machines made out of protein, and they use vitamins, they use minerals to do their machine work of, capturing the free radicals and literally catching the bad oxygen molecules. They break these free radical chain reactions. They block the oxidation, but it's enzymes that we need, and they come from protein. And a lot of folks, a lot of women, especially menopausal women, I've found don't get anywhere near enough protein in their diet.
Right. That's really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your link in the description, and I highly recommend everyone read that book because it's called Dark Calories. Amazing. You won't be able to put it down. It's just filled with gold information that
the link
wish
in the
we would have got
description this time.
like 30 years
Dr.
ago,
Berg,
when I started getting interested in nutrition. So I just appreciate you spending the time giving us this data, and I'll have to have you back on real soon. But
I would
thank you
love to.
so much.
I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Okay. And seed oils no bueno, seemingly ubiquitous. Let you know what we from her book Dark Calories. But we are at the time, so let's pray. And Heavenly Father, Lord, just thank you that for this time we're able to react to various things, God. Thank you for Stephen Crowder, for Tucker Carlson, God. Just ask that truth surrounding Charlie, both in his legacy and what happened to him, comes to the forefront, that there would be nothing hidden. All the people responsible would be held accountable, God. And that you'd continue to use Charlie's martyrdom to bring you glory and bring people closer to you and to change our country and our world for the better. We ask that you'd help us to be more discerning with seed oils, God, and there would be accountability for the food companies that are using them so much and poisoning so many people. We ask that this day would be blessed, and that we would be able to do it again tomorrow. Pray in your son Jesus' name. All right, everybody. Have a blessed one.